G'day mate, 40 here. So I grew up a Seventh-day Adventist Christian, and for many of my early years I thought the single best judge of whether or not someone was a good person was whether they were a Christian. Then I grew older and I started thinking, well, the single best judge of whether someone is a good person is if they are religiously observant, or if they believe that God gave the Torah, or God gave the Bible, or that God was behind the Bible, that God gave religious directions for how we should lead our life. And then I kind of grew out of that. And so here is what I think is the best single gauge of whether or not someone is likely to behave decently. And that is, to what extent are they able to be honest about themselves? To what extent are they at ease with who they are? So I find people who are honest with themselves and who are at ease with who they are tend to have better relationships with members of their family, extended family, friends, and community, and they are the least likely people to go out into the world and cause needless harm. So I have not noticed a huge correlation between religiosity and decency. I do think that if you have no in-group identity or very little in-group identity, you will be more at ease in the world if you increase the intensity of your in-group identity, at least up to a medium. So in, I think, the first episode of Yellowstone, this old Indian guy says to a young white man, until they find a cure for human nature, most people will belong with their own kind. So your own kind, in-group identity can be racial, religious, ethnic, professional, geographic, cultural. Whatever your group is, if you have a connection with other people, right, I think you will be happier and more effective at life, and therefore you'll be less inclined to go out there and do unnecessary harm to other people. Now, I've seen a lot of people become finer as they become more religious. I've seen other people become finer, kinder, more open and honest as they become less religious. So I have not generally seen a strong correlation between religiosity and somebody's decency, but I do believe that in certain times, in certain places, that increased religiosity does tend to lead to a decrease in criminal behavior, a decrease in drunkenness, a decrease in wife beating. So in certain times, in certain places, I do believe that religiosity correlates with a higher level of ethics. In 2024, United States of America, based on my life experience, I don't see much of a correlation between religiosity and decency. I notice that in general, higher IQ people tend to be more capable of empathy, which is a form of abstract thought. You're able to put yourself into other people's shoes. So I noticed that 130 IQ secular people tend to generally behave better than 100 IQ religious people. And secular people who are on good terms with their family and friends, I noticed they consistently behave better than religious people who are not on good terms with their family and friends. So I am talking about this because I just saw an interesting paper by an economist. His name is Matt Lowe, and he graduated from one of the top economic PhD programs in the world, the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, MIT. Now he is a professor at the University of British Columbia, that's Western Canada. And he's got a new paper out about religious revivals. So he writes, cultural beliefs usually evolve slowly, but during times of religious revival, beliefs change rapidly. I don't know if you saw the movie starring Robert Duvall called The Apostle. Robert Duvall was a flawed preacher man, but at one point he is confronted by a man bent on doing evil, and Robert Duvall, Bible in hand, goes out to this man and effectively changes his heart in about 1 minute. And I do believe that happens, particularly with Christianity. There is an essence, a simplicity to the Christian message that can be communicated, I think, effectively to someone in a minute. And I do believe that lives have been changed within a minute, particularly with regard to Christianity. And so this particular economist, he studied the 2-year Christian Welsh revival of 1904-1905. We all know about this fantastic Christian Welsh revival of 1904-05. So 6% of the adult population converted to Christianity. And this was a religious shock to the Welsh culture, and it was temporary. Church membership returned to pre-revival levels 5 years later. So I've been to a Billy Graham crusade in Sacramento around 1983 or 84, and it was like a hit of some spiritual cocaine. It was very moving, but these religious revivals, they tend to wear off in a matter of weeks and months. But what happened during the 2-year Christian Welsh revival of 1904-05 and in the years afterwards? So first, there was church growth during the revival was higher in areas with more crime and more mining. Second, comparing Wales with neighboring England, the Christian revival led to a reduction in aggregate crime by 15%. This crime reduction was concentrated among violent crime and drunkenness. And third, despite temporary effects of the revival on church membership, effects on crime persisted. So there was an enduring shift in moral behavior, in the observance of social norms following the Great Welsh Revival of 1904-05. So there is Vogel's theory of America's great awakenings. America has had periodic Christian revivals. So social crisis often predicts religious revival, and religious revival then brings lasting social change. So societies, like individuals, can change rapidly, and societies are governed not just through laws, but also through norms. So laws deter bad behavior through state-led threats of punishment, and norms deter bad behavior through the social cost of deviance. So the Welsh revival of 1904-05 was a large but temporary religious shock. 6% of the population over the age of 11 converted to Christianity in just 2 years. Right, there's a terrific podcast called We Think It's Funny, hosted by a couple of Orthodox Jews, Denny Lobell, Mark Schiff. Here we go.
And I was kind of still on the fence about whether or not, now we left the conversion in New York. We come to LA. We find out the conversion doesn't transfer from New York to LA, and we'd have to start.
The Jews are driving each other crazy.
We'd have to start the whole conversion process over again.
Really?
So this is the host, Denny Lobell, who went to yeshivas, got thrown out of yeshivas, became a stand-up comic, hated Judaism, fell in love with a non-Jewish woman, and then it sounds like she drove the desire for them to return to Judaism, and as she converted to Judaism, he would accompany her to these conversion classes.
It annoyed me.
That's
I said,
ridiculous.
you know what? Maybe it's not for me. And I was trying to figure out, do I even want to continue this? I'm in LA. It's a new start. It's a new beginning. I'm working for Ralphie May. Maybe I just go
I knew Ralphie from Houston. Yeah, that's
right.
funny.
I think maybe I just go back to being secular and not continue on this path. And I asked a few people who were comedians their opinions about it. I asked Ari Shafir, who had gone off of religious Judaism.
But Ari is still pro. Like he endorses it.
But he doesn't do it.
He doesn't do it himself.
So I asked him his opinion. I asked you your opinion, because you to me seemed like very religious.
Oh, that's hilarious.
So
okay.
I came up to you
a
and
Quaker compared to most.
Well, I thought,
well,
let me ask a very religious comedian, why would you do this? It doesn't seem compatible with comedy, with being a comedian.
So the guest here is Avi Lieberman, who grew up going to Orthodox Jewish day schools in Texas, even if he wasn't strictly Orthodox at home in his family life.
So I went up and I asked you, and you probably don't remember.
I don't remember what God, I'm afraid to hear this answer. Go ahead.
But it was a good answer, and
Okay.
it was a helpful answer. You told me that comedy is always up and down. You need something stable in your life that's good and it's always there. And you can be a comedian, and there are challenges to being observant and being a comedian, but it's worth it to have that sense of something, some kind of a sense of security, of something stable in your life.
Yeah, did
you
know
told me that?
Because I would see friends of mine.
Yeah.
Glad you appreciated the answer. I see friends of mine, and like their entire happiness and being was associated, tied into their careers, how successful am I in show business.
Right.
And friends of mine have
basing your happiness on your career in showbiz, that does sound incredibly volatile. It makes your happiness incredibly vulnerable, up and down, according to all sorts of things outside your control.
have told me I can't separate it. Like one friend of mine, she goes, I take medication because I cannot separate If I'm, successful on a show or I'm did this, then it's fine. And if I'm not, I'm sad and this. And I'm just like, there should be something else. Like you shouldn't, in any career, I think that you should have something else outside of that, which is more important than that.
Well, yeah.
And I remember seeing that, and it's true, because you're gonna have your ups and downs, and you're gonna have times where you're not working, times when you are, and things are popular and then they're not. And it's, I always felt good. I was like, as much of a burden as you have of like, I don't put in for Fridays. It's a one day out of the week where I can't get time and whatever. But the other stuff I think outweighs all the problems that you have.
It was good advice, and I followed it. I took it to heart because I thought, that really makes sense. Because I couldn't understand how it would make sense, and I thought that makes sense. Have something stable in your life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you probably deal with it more than I do. I mean, you're on the when you're on the road and all that kind of stuff. And did you feel that because you got religious when you
an hour ago?
Right, that was it.
He's almost done with it now.
Right, that's Mark Schiff, an author and comic friend of Jerry Seinfeld.
Yeah.
For me, I always believed in God. It was never an issue, and then I always loved rabbis. I can't explain it to you. I mean, there's something about them.
Even ours. No, I'm teasing. Yeah,
we have a great rabbi.
Yeah, we
Musk
do. We're very lucky.
Rabbi. So it's never being around religious people. I always, for some reason, trusted them more, or kind of adored them. I don't know,
Yeah,
so
you seem to gravitate toward it. You seem very comfortable with it.
I was born with it, so I was kind of blessed. I never looked the other way.
Yeah, I always admired Mark, as he said he would do these gigs, and it would be at Jewish when he was like, I also want a Talmud. That was Mark's writer. Like he wanted another book, and he wanted a Talmud. And one rabbi, he's going to go, "Where's my Talmud?" He's screaming at the guy.
2 full sets of shot machines.
Did you really get it?
Yeah.
He went after a guy, I think. Once the guy didn't get it.
Any Orthodox gig.
So Avi Lieberman is interesting, successful, though not spectacularly successful stand-up comic, who is also a bachelor into his 50s, and that's highly unusual in traditional Jewish life.
Yiddish for like religious or observant. Right. And I go, then a call from this guy, his beard. You have to understand. And I'll always and then
so he's talking here about when he's trying to pitch a rabbi on doing a comedy show at the synagogue.
There's really ultra-Orthodox. So I have like little tricks. If the guy calls me out, I know that they're very black hat, I'll throw in a couple of words here and there, because their concern is always, is this going to be clean? You have to understand. And I'll always go, well, how stark a crowd are we talking here? And when I use that word, because like there's no way you would know that. Yeah. And I told a comic once, I think it was Kira Sultana. I got this call from this guy. His beard's down to the floor. He's all in black. And I go, just throw that word in. Ask him. And she go, how do you say it again? I think it's stark. I guess like
stark. You can't say stark. If you say stark, you get found out.
It's like Yiddish for like religious or observant. And I go, then as soon as I said that once, the guy goes, "Oh, I can tell by the way you're speaking, this will be fine." I guess. Okay. So it's like, you got to kind of put him at ease. It's so funny. It was just Passover, and you have these Passover programs. Right. And I think we've all done them. And
okay, back to religious revival. So this economist was looking to see if there was a lasting moral effect from the religious revival that swept through Wales 1904 to 1905. And he says this religious shock, all right, it was temporary, but it significantly shifted social norms. It reduced violent and public drunkenness crimes in Wales. And while the religious revival was temporary, the crime reductions endured until at least 1913. By contrast, a landmark piece of anti-drunkenness legislation, the Sunday Closing Act of 1881, had no impact on drunkenness crimes. So sometimes religious-driven norms will trump secular laws at ensuring social order. And this Christian revival in Wales itself was larger, where there was more crime and more structural transformation. So societies may well self-correct once there are social breakdowns that are eventually stymied by some endogenous, meaning outside, cultural response. So my paper leaves 2 main questions unanswered. First, on the origins of revival. While religion resolves cultural tensions in the case of religious revival, can other non-religious movements play the same role? Here's his key question. Could populism and nationalism be a parallel to religious revivals in certain societies? So populism means that the people are united. So populism and nationalism go together. There is an egalitarian and unifying quality to each. Populism depends upon an understanding of the people united. And so you have higher group cohesion, higher social trust with increases in populism and nationalism. And for most people, if they go from low levels of in-group identity to at least moderate levels, they're going to be happier and more effective. So you increase social trust and social cohesion through a revival of populism and nationalism. You would think that there would be something of a moral improvement because you feel more at ease with the community around you, because you feel you have more in common with the people around you, and you have more of a sense that you're in it together. So people, when they are more at ease as opposed under more pressure, people tend to behave better. When someone's running late, when I'm running late, I tend to be quite brusque. I'm not particularly caring and empathic when I'm running late for something important. And so how general are the effects of religious revivals? Right. So there were similar effects in the Welsh revival of 1859. So what about the American Third Great Awakening of the late 1800s, the Azusa Street revival of the early 1900s, the Hebrides revival of 1949, and the Toronto Blessing in the 1990s? Did they all have the same effects leading to a moral and social renewal? Now, there are times when higher in-group identity means that you will perhaps be more cruel to outgroups. So there's no magic key to decency and ethics. When Israel was put under severe pressure following October 7, 2023, Israel struck back hard. New York Times has a long investigative piece here.
Israel loosened its rules to bomb Hamas fighters, killing many more civilians. This article is by Patrick Kingsley, Nathan Odenheimer, Bilal Speer, Ronan Bergman, John Ismay, Shira Frankel, and Adam Sella, and read by an automated voice. At exactly 1 p.m. on October 7, 2023, Israel's military leadership issued an order that unleashed one of the most intense bombing campaigns in contemporary warfare. Effective immediately, the order granted mid-ranking Israeli officers the authority to strike thousands of militants and military sites that had never been a priority in previous wars in Gaza. Officers could now pursue not only the senior Hamas commanders, arms depots and rocket launchers that were the focus of earlier campaigns, but also the lowest-ranking fighters. In each strike, the order said, officers had the authority to risk killing up to 20 civilians. The order, which has not previously been reported, had no precedent in Israeli military history. Mid-ranking officers had never been given so much leeway to attack so many targets, many of which had lower military significance at such a high potential civilian cost. It meant, for example, that the military could target rank-and-file militants as they were at home surrounded by relatives and neighbors, instead of only when they were alone outside. In previous conflicts with Hamas, many Israeli strikes were approved only after officers concluded that no civilians would be.
So after October 7, Israel scaled back on its restrictions of going to war with Hamas. This is Robert Eggers on doing creative work in a secular age. This sounds precious, but it's hard to do creative work in a modern secular society because it becomes all about ego and yourself. Well, in a populist nationalist revival, your life becomes less about your ego and yourself. And I am envious. I'm envious of medieval craftsmen who are doing the work for God. You get to be creative to celebrate something else. You're censoring yourself because it's not about me, me, me. I got to rein me, me, me back because that's not what this order piece needs to be. Any worldview where everything around them is full of meaning is exciting to me because we live in such a tiresome, lame commercial culture right now. So in a more nationalist and populist culture, right, it's less about me, 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 and more about us, us, us.
Be hurt. Sometimes officers could risk killing up to 5 civilians, and only rarely did the limit rise to 10 or above, though the actual death toll was sometimes much higher.
Right, this is Yossi Klein Halevi weighing in on this New York Times piece.
Israeli Jews from left, right, and center all agreed that the rules of engagement have to change because the goal has to change. The goal after October 7th, in order to restore our deterrence, could no longer be to deter Hamas from firing rockets or crossing the border, but the goal was now to destroy the Hamas regime.
It's 7 o'clock p.m. on Sunday, December 29th in New York City, on the fifth night of Hanukkah. It's 2 o'clock a.m. on Monday, December 30th, as Israelis transition to a new day, and hopefully not going through a night in which they will find themselves in bomb shelters again due to the Houthi alarm clock, as too many nights in recent nights have been filled by sirens going off across Israel that send Israelis into their bomb shelters. Israelis have also just marked the 450th day of the war, which began with the October 7th massacre. 450 days of 100 Israelis still held in captivity by Hamas in Gaza. This number also includes 34 Israelis confirmed by Israel to be dead. A few days ago, on Thursday, the New York Times published a long, exhaustive, investigative piece titled, "Israel Loosened Its Rules to Bomb Hamas Fighters, Killing Many More Civilians." The article outlines Israel's unprecedented shift in military strategy and rules of engagement during its response to the October 7th attack by Hamas. The article highlights that Israeli mid-ranking officers were granted significant authority to strike thousands of targets, and the article cites that when decisions are made for operations against Hamas leaders or fighters, all terrorists I might add, there's always a risk of civilians being killed in that operation.
So when you're fighting for survival, I would expect in general that you would have less intense moral
America is becoming more
restrictions.
diverse. America is, celebrating our diversity, and our diversity is our strength. And we are seeing that diversity in academia, we have seen that in businesses, and now we are seeing that in politics. And which is really important, that we focus on and celebrate our diversity because it is the diversity that has made this America as great a country as it is.
So diversity is a nice word for we have less in common. And when we have less in common with each other, we're less trusting, less cohesive, and life sucks more. And this is a U.S. congressman from Michigan's 13th district celebrating that the United States is becoming less white.
But the article argues that Israel is now taking greater risk that could involve more civilians being killed, more civilian collateral damage. The appropriate level of risk has, according to the Times, always been quantified by the IDF. No more than 10 civilian lives could be risked in such an operation when Israel is taking out a Hamas terrorist. But since Israel responded to October 7th to eliminate the threat of Hamas and restore deterrence, that number, according to the Times report, has increased to 20 civilian lives at risk in any operation. The Times article does implicitly acknowledge that the IDF still goes to extraordinary lengths to avoid civilian casualties whenever possible, but the same article conveys skepticism over how the...
So there was a remark by a modern Orthodox Zionist rabbi that has always stayed with me. I heard it first time about 30 years ago, and he said it'd be great if Israel could be 10% more moral in how it wages war, but if Israel were 25% more moral in how it wages war, it would cease to exist. It simply wouldn't be able to survive. And so too, with I would expect many people in business, it might be great if they were 5 or 10% more ethical in how they do business, but if they try to be 25% more ethical in how they do business, they might well go out of business.
The IDF determines the number of civilian areas are in an area it is about to attack before launching an operation. When I read the article, I was struck by the complexity of what the IDF does in this war to calculate that number of civilians in any area it is going into. But the net out of the piece is that all of these newer methodologies and rules of engagement and command and control structures are departures from earlier, stricter protocols aimed at minimizing civilian harm. To discuss the ethics of Israel fighting a just
right, Yossi Klein
from the Shalom Hartman Institute, prolific author and co-host of one of my favorite podcasts, for heaven's sakes, Yossi joins us from Jerusalem. Hi, Yossi.
No, if there were sirens, it was over Shabbat, and I probably of things.
All right. Well, I'm glad you're.
So, life in Israel is frequently rushing to a bomb shelter after the latest rocket attack from the Houthis or from Hamas or Hezbollah or some other terrorist group.
You're okay, and that coming out of Shabbat, you're well rested, which is the most important issue of concern to our Call Me Back community. I want to talk to you about, which is why I reached out to you, this big investigative piece in the New York Times titled "Israel Loosened Limits on Strikes, Multiplying Risks to Gaza Civilians." And then the subhead is Flawed Methods for Assessing Targets. And the gist of the piece, and I talked about it in the introduction, but just to summarize here, it's a massive investigative piece that I think, based on the hype around it, conveyed that this piece revealed the change in Israeli tactics, the loosening of standards, and the increase.
So if you are curious about what's going on in Israel over the last 15 months, I think this Call Me Back podcast is the best single source of which I am aware.
Increasing aggressiveness of the IDF that has contributed to extremely high number, according to the New York Times and according to the Gazan Health Ministry, the Hamas-run Gazan Health Ministry, an extremely high number of casualties. Specifically, obviously, this article is focused on civilian casualties. And the four areas, again, we'll link to the article in the show notes. The main areas of criticism are, one, historically, when the IDF has conducted operations against terrorists, specifically in Gaza, there was a rule that if the IDF had its eyes on a terrorist.
So when Israel was attacked, October 7, 2023, the country united. So you had stronger in-group identity, more social cohesion, more social trust. But along with a more intense in-group identity, there are more negative feelings about out-groups, such as Gazans, Palestinians, and less concern about the well-being of out-groups. So you have more concern about the welfare of members of your in-group, less concern about the welfare of members of your out-group.
That it needed to take out. There often is a risk, even when Israel takes all these precautions that they take, which most Western militaries do not take, I might add, to warn civilians in the area, to get civilians out before the operation takes place. Obviously, you can never be foolproof. You can never be 100%. And there are often some number of civilians that could be killed in the crossfire of the operation. Historically, the IDF has had as a goal to limit the number of civilians in these situations that are killed to 10 or fewer, and that in this war against Hamas, that number had been raised to 20 or fewer, meaning you're taking out a high-value target. That high-value target, even with warnings and efforts to remove the civilians, there's still up to 20 civilians nearby. The fact that there are up to 20 civilians nearby does not preclude the IDF from taking out that terrorist. Again, whereas in the past, the limit had been 10. Second, the way that the methodology the IDF uses to estimate how many civilians there is criticized. We can get into that. 3, the types of bombs Israel is using in these operations. And 4, the nature of the warnings that it does to civilians. Are the warnings robust as they used to be, that the IDF has used in previous wars? So this is the crux of the piece, which again the New York Times uses to explain why there have been so many Palestinians killed, and specifically civilians, although, again, as even the New York Times concedes in this article, they're relying on Hamas Health Ministry data, and even their data doesn't distinguish between civilians and combatants. So it makes this all very tricky.
So I'm looking at these people on Fox News who are wearing Christmassy stuff. And I remember one time in a workplace, I just put on some red Christmas elf hat. And it disturbed people because they knew that I had a strong commitment to Judaism. And it disturbed people that I would goof around with anything Christmassy. So much of our reality is conditioned by how other people respond to us. It was simply just unbearable for me to even mess around wearing an elf hat during Christmas time because other people found it so incongruous.
But that said, Yossi, what was your immediate response to this article?
So I would just add first a fifth category from the article, which is that Israel loosened the rules of engagement with targets who were not necessarily high value. Basically, any Hamas terrorist was fair game, and the number of civilian casualties that were considered acceptable were also loosened. I have to tell you, Dan, that I did not fall off my chair reading this, and I don't know anyone in Israel who did. This article didn't really break new ground. We all understood that the IDF had necessarily loosened the rules of engagement, and we should really talk about why it was necessary to loosen those rules of engagement. But the other response that I had was reading this. I said, well, we actually are not an army out of control, which is how so much of the media has portrayed us. There are rules. The rules have been.
So Israel loosens the rules with which it fights the enemy. Israel develops higher in-group identification, and Israel more successfully wages war on its enemies. So turned out to be pretty good for Israel and pretty bad for Hamas, Hezbollah, and those civilians who were living next to or were affected by the war on Hamas and Hezbollah. All right, back to closer to home. Here are 3 comics talking about Judaism. Avi Lieberman, Mark Schiff, Danny Lobell.
It's every time you walk in, there are 300 kids sitting in the first 2 rows.
Right.
And I have to deal with like, wow, you're clean. I go, what you find funny and what an 8-year-old finds funny are not the same things. Then they get up and they're bored. So sometimes it's
I hate those jokes.
Or they run on
They're
stage.
awful,
We've had
Well,
that.
no, we had a good
Unless
one.
the adults are there.
We did. We had a good
We had
one
a really
together.
good.
Lowell Sanders, who opens for
Okay.
Tim Allen,
Okay.
black guy, very funny. You know Lorenz.
Oh.
Yeah. So Lowell's on stage and he's just demolishing.
Uh-huh.
And Dan is looking at me and he's just looking at him and he just turns and he goes, you just can't compete. It's not fair. It's because they're a novelty like that. Oh, this is an Irish guy. He was a real comedian.
Right,
that's how they
Well,
are.
I'll go
It's
up with a
ridiculous.
Scottish brogue and we'll trick
There,
him.
that's what we got to do.
You do-
Marty, never ask somebody if they have kids.
Right.
If they have kids, they'll enough as it is come up to me and just go, "We got to get you married." I'm just like, you know what? You got to stop. I haven't snapped back at them, but I'm just like, like I'm fully aware that I'm single. I don't need you reminding me of
think
it.
he's
Like
an
it's
Well, there's a price to be paid for all group identity. And if you want to be a part of a traditional Jewish way of life, you're going to get sniped at and reminded and pushed to move on from your bachelorhood to a married status. It feels disruptive and discombobulating for the wider community to have some dude entering his 50s, such as myself, who's still a bachelor. From a traditional Jewish perspective, you're a schmuck, a schmendrick, and a selfish putz.
Adonis or
enough.
something, the way they go after him.
Yeah, it's like it's hard enough as it is. Like if you want to come up and say, "Oh, there's someone I might want to set you up with," like, okay, I'm flattered. Like that's very nice. But when you just come up and go, "We got to get you married," like I don't, you don't need. It's like Rabbi Musk said something very smart. You never ask somebody if they have kids.
Right.
If they have kids, they'll tell you. Believe me, it'll come up
Oh,
because they might not be having trouble. How do you know? Like, don't do that. And it's I feel like people do that all the time. And
in the Jewish world, but
infuriating.
not in the real world. They don't do it. And when you leave the Jewish world, nobody cares if you're married or if you're not married.
Well, then I think it's certain cultures. So it's the more traditional the cultures, the more they're going to get on you.
I remember when I was single and I was lonely. I was so depressed.
It's awful. Yeah.
And
So I notice in general, married people seem to be more functional and more decent, more upstanding than unmarried. I think in general, better people get married, and those who never marry tend to have the most severe psychological dysfunctions, such as myself.
It sucks.
I'm not sorry. I didn't mean to put it on you.
No.
I'm saying for me,
it's the reality.
I was very lonely when I was single, and I was very sad. And I finally found love with Kylie. And
How did you two meet? Because she's not Jewish. I figured that you were. Where did you two meet? In a club?
Well, I didn't want to date Jews. I wanted nothing to do with Judaism.
Oh, that makes sense. Okay.
I was so anti.
So I choose to live in an Orthodox Jewish community, and that means I'm not going to walk down the street holding hands with a non-Jewish woman. I'm not going to take a sheksa, a non-Jewish woman, to a kosher restaurant. It would not be pleasant for me to be going out with a non-Jew and to run into members of my religious community and have to face the questions. So all group identities and all groups make demands on its members. And when you're part of an intense, Orthodox Jewish community, one of the rules is that you don't date outside the tribe.
Religious. I thought if I get a Jewish girl, she's going to suck me back into Judaism. I'm never dating another Jew. I'm not going near Jewish people, so then
hilarious.
she converts.
Yeah.
So,
Kylie's like, makes
I,
us look not Jewish.
So
Yeah.
God had the laugh on me there. But I thought, okay, so I'm only going to date Gentiles. I don't want to be part of this Jewish thing anymore. So I finally find love with Kylie, and I've got a girlfriend, and I go to some event with my parents are there, and somebody from the synagogue comes up to me and goes, "Hey, Danny, I hear you have a girlfriend, and she is not a Jew."
Yeah.
I go, "Yeah. Come on. You crazy? Okay, so now it's okay. But one day you're going to wake up and you're going to turn over in the bed and say, 'Who is Moses?' And she won't know. And you're going to be with a wife who doesn't even know who Moses." First of all, she knows plenty about Moses now. But I remember walking away so angry at him, and I think, where were you when I was single and lonely You didn't seem to care then. As soon as I find somebody, now you have.
Yeah, this is just the nature of the community. You want connection with someone, it's going to come at a price. But when you violate social norms, there's going to be pushback, and you can't reason with people that they should not have these instinctive, horrified reactions, right? You are choosing to be part of a traditional Jewish community, and I choose to be part of that, and it comes with certain restrictions on your
I
freedom.
have an issue with who it is and what religion they are, but your heart wasn't bleeding so much when I was lying alone in my bed with nobody who loved me, you know?
Right.
So
See,
why now do you, so it's kind of the opposite.
Yeah, they're not
you
that
have.
bad with me when it comes.
Because we normally primarily think about ourselves, and then we live our lives within a particular in-group, and then when we encounter members of our in-group who are behaving in a discombobulating, disorienting, unusual, forbidden fashion, then we react to that. We normally don't worry about it if someone is, feeling lonely or sad. It's only when they act in a way that violates our sense of propriety, then we instinctively react.
That stuff. It's like it's not done out of being nasty or mean. They're doing it out of concern and caring. It's but it's just sometimes you got to be careful how you express those concerns.
What you said.
What?
See, we discussed. Don't mention having kids, but lying in bed lonely, nobody loves me.
Mm-hmm.
It's good we have him here.
Yeah, thank God. Thank God I'm here.
You know how to
it's
lay
not
out
that bad. When things are going badly both your lives, you go,
I almost started weeping
I could be
for the
Avi.
poor guy.
Yeah, I could
Who's
be
going
Avi.
home tonight,
Well, you don't know.
lonely,
Nothing.
lying in
He
bed.
might have
My
a girlfriend
baseball
there.
team
I don't know.
lost.
He's got
Yeah.
nothing
Oh,
there.
gosh,
You
I'm
brought it
sorry.
up, my
Yeah, it's the
God.
worst.
Well,
yeah.
look,
I can't believe it.
Yeah.
I'm not going to tell him to get married.
There was one girl. It was funny. I went to oh
He's
gosh, I
had
should
it-
plug
heard it
my
enough.
book. The speaking of like girls that I can't be with. The when I went to Moscow, I wrote this book called Traveling During the Pandemic, up on Amazon, and they. So Russia was one of the countries I went to, like during
remember
this.
following that on Facebook.
Yeah, and I walk into this Shabbat dinner in Moscow, and there's this girl there, and I was like, "Good Lord, who's it?" And I thought it was the rabbi's daughter, and she's like, "I'm in my 30s." She was like this very pretty, and there's no question had I stuck around, we'd be dating, right? It was clearly we were flirting with each other, we talked to each other. I walked in, and then I went back to Moscow again a year later.
Right. I also have anecdotes and stories and fantasies where I'm in some new city, new location, and I meet someone and I develop all these fantasies about, oh, if only I lived here, we'd be dating. But fantasies, at least in my experience, don't necessarily accord with reality. You get to a new place, you feel relieved from the pressures to conform that you experience back at home, and you read far more into an interaction than perhaps is really there.
And we met up, and then I was like, I'll fly, let's meet in Israel. And then the war breaks out. She's like, I can't get out of here. And then she finally moves to Israel because the war was driving her nuts. And then the war breaks out in Israel. And she's like, I have to go see my mom now. And just like I'm like, what the hell's going on? It's just clear. So it's just kind of funny.
I mean, are you still in touch with her?
Yeah, but I don't know, who knows? Like we live in, but I feel like saying like, I can tell there's one girl, also one that I hit on in Israel. And I can tell a lot of it is, well, you don't live here. And I feel like saying, what makes you think I wouldn't move here?
So Avi Lieberman, like myself, decided to devote our professional lives to our self-expression. He's primarily a stand-up comic. I've long been a blogger and a vlogger, and this comes with certain prices. Most women do not look at men with these passions as good husband material. So we chose our profession or our avocation, and then one of the prices of our choice is that women are much less likely to see us as stable, solid providers.
Why
If
don't
it
you
was,
say
like,
that?
serious.
What do you say?
Well, I'll
that?
let her bring it up. I want her to bring it up first.
This is my brother.
So-
I have a brother who's single also, and he
Lying in bed alone.
lying in bed alone,
It's
miserable.
worse than Avi.
But I said to
Hard
him,
to imagine that it could be that bad.
I tried to set him up with this girl, and when he was in L.A., and he said, "Well, I don't want to get stuck in L.A. I don't want to date her because what if we fall in love and then she, I said, well,
God forbid.
this is a hypothetical
Yeah.
situation, but you're assuming everything is going to go so great, you're going to be in love, and now your big problem is location. Well, that's not too bad, right? You found somebody you love,
Yeah.
But and then, and then I say, how come in New York? He goes, I don't want to be stuck in New York.
that is a fair to take his side, to be stuck in New York.
I don't want to be stuck in New York either.
Does he take elevators in case he gets stuck in the elevator? He doesn't want.
You don't want to be stuck anywhere.
I don't want to be stuck in the elevator.
Yeah.
So I actually went. A friend of mine invited me for a Shabbat to spend Shabbat. Itana Hecht. She comes to shows and knows all the time. She lives in Beit Shemesh, which that's like the Cleveland. That's the city we make fun of. It's like this. What do you do there? And I spent the weekend there, and she's like, I realized, they go to their friends, and they're married with kids. And on Saturdays, you go to synagogue, you come back for lunch. They walk and meet one friend. They walk and meet another one. Their kids are outside playing with the guys. I was like,
So what determines whether I like a community or a business? All right, it all depends upon the people there. If I got mates there, then I love it. And the weather and the scenery and everything else doesn't matter to me nearly as much as my mates. Do I have mates there or not? If I got mates, it's great. If I don't have mates, not so great. So I don't care if it's Cleveland or Beit Shemesh or Jerusalem or Los Angeles or Sydney or Brisbane. For me, it primarily comes down to, do I have mates there? Do I have friends there? If I have friends there, then everything else is secondary.
I get it. Like you don't need to be in like a big city. Once you're married with kids, like it doesn't matter where you live. You live where your family is. Like that's your home.
Yeah.
And who cares what the location is? Like it doesn't matter.
I said to Mark, I don't have any family here outside of my immediate family, and he says neither do I.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My brother's family.
So this host, Denny Lobell, he is a full-time podcaster, right? He makes his own podcasts. He helps other people with their podcasts, and this is his living. Not many blokes can support a family based on their podcasting endeavors.
I got a couple of cousins.
Mom's deep in the valley, but I don't see them that often. It's
Do your
the amount that I'm out of town.
Do your parents ask you when you're going to get married or try?
No, they're very good about that. I think my dad's an educational psychologist, so with a doctor from Harvard, which he's kind of like almost
quietly analyzing you.
Yeah, and I think he was great. He's always been good about he's even said it's, what, there are worse things in life I can think of going through life trying to make people laugh and make them happier. If he said once, he brought up people in history who never got married. And I think he's kind of resigned. It might not happen. And if it doesn't, okay.
Charles Manson never got married.
Who?
Charles Manson.
Yeah, there you go.
Never got married.
Yeah, who would think?
Example.
Yeah, that's, yeah.
I mean, there are a lot of
I think Aristotle never got married. There are a lot of people, but it's what I like to, yes. I mean, it's also because I have a great dad. So sometimes I think you want to kind of pass those things along. But
right.
But it's not. I mean, my friend. It's interesting. My friend Tarun Chetty, who's a very funny comic with Indian. Yeah, Tarun's a great guy. Yeah. So and he said he was like, you're doing this and all this stuff. I go, I'm not happy though. Like I said, if it's not, the exterior might view this, might appear that you're doing all these things, but I'm sure there are people who aren't doing as much as me who are way more content and fulfilled. And he kind of took a step back. Oh no, I didn't think.
I wish I hope you do find a lot of happiness.
Oh, thank you. I'm not miserable. Don't get me wrong, but it's I think there's more to do, no question.
So we think it's funny.
Noise that someone thought it was a gun. They screamed out.
The Irish guy. I want 1,000 river dancers before, and it's the British guy. What do you want? He goes, for God's sakes, kill me first. Right? That's it. You have to watch that.
So I might as well tell one now too.
Yeah.
So there's this Frenchman, a Russian guy, and a Jewish guy, and they're stuck in the desert, just crawling around,
right? Nothing
for days. And the French guy goes, "I'm tired, I'm thirsty, I must have wine." Then they look at the Russian guy. How are you? He goes, "I'm tired, I'm thirsty, I must have vodka." Then they look at the Jewish guy. "I'm tired, I'm thirsty, I must have diabetes."
Jokes are the best.
That's great.
Yeah. This one, Saul and Murray. Are we doing jokes?
Yeah, sure.
This one, Saul and Murray sitting on a bench. Saul sees Murray. He goes up to him and goes, "Murray, you look a little down." He goes, "Well, 3 months ago, my sister passed away. She left me $1 million." He goes, "Murray, I don't mean to sound insensitive, but your sister was 98. She wasn't doing so hot, and you've been broke your whole life. Like, $1 million is not." He goes, "Well, 2 months ago, my brother passed away. He left me $5 million." He goes, "Are you out of here? Your brother was 101. He was on life support. This is enough already. And you had $5 million. Take half of this, give it to charity, keep half for yourself. You live like a king for the rest of your life. What are you still so upset about?" He goes, "This month, nothing."
This month, nothing. All right. Little taste of the joys of intense in-group identity. 3 Orthodox Jews who are also professional comics. And this is a professional pundit and author, Yossi Klein Halevi, talking to professional author and podcast host Dan Senor.
Adjusted, but our commitment to fighting a war based on rules remains. And I think that for me, in some ways, that was the major takeaway. And the fact that the army is still actively engaged in these conversations, and we're not acting the way Putin does in Ukraine or the way he did in Chechnya, et cetera, et cetera. One could go on across the globe for other examples. And so it was in a certain way, contrary to what the Times thought they were doing. It was actually somewhat reassuring. But really, I think, Dan, the important question here is why the rules of engagement were loosened. What necessitated that on October 7th? And beyond the emotional response to the atrocities, I think there was something very well thought out here, which is what we understood on October 7th was that we were facing an existential threat to the credibility of our deterrence, which is another way of saying that Israel's ability to survive in the Middle East in the long term was in jeopardy because the weakest of our enemies had delivered the most devastating blow we'd ever experienced. And so there was an immediate decision that wasn't only taken in the upper echelons of the army and the government, but across the society. Israeli Jews from left, right, and center all agreed that the rules of engagement have to change because the goal has to change.
And the situation changed. You just had an invasion, right? No country maintains sufficient forces on its border to deter an invasion. What deters an invasion, similar to what Israel suffered October 7, 2023, is the threat of retaliation. So you could have thousands of cartel members in northern Mexico assemble and then rampage into Southern California and kill thousands of people. What deters them is the threat of American retaliation.
The goal after October 7th, in order to restore our deterrence, could no longer be to deter Hamas from firing rockets or crossing the border, but the goal was now to destroy the Hamas regime. And when you've changed the goals, as opposed to all of our other mini wars in Gaza until now, those were all based on a very limited goal of trying to prevent Hamas from firing rockets.
Question of international law in these situations. Yeah, international law was written under the assumption that
So the U.S. Constitution is not a death warrant. So there may be parts of the Constitution that need to be suspended in times of emergency so that the United States can survive. But for no country should their Constitution be a death warrant. All working democracies have the ability to turn into dictatorships during times of emergency and to suspend any and all rights so that the nation state can survive. All nation states are going to put a priority on their own survival at a much higher rate than observing their own laws, observing their own constitutions, let alone observing international law.
There are times when war is necessary and that victory is necessary as well. Could Israel have achieved the military aims necessary for this war it's fighting without loosening some of the restrictions it had adhered to in the past?
Absolutely not. I mean, as it is, we found ourselves fighting a year-long war, and it's still not over yet. And Hamas had years to build up its strength, thanks, of course, in part to our prime minister, but we won't go there. But the force that we encountered was so formidable, so deeply entrenched, that to destroy Hamas required a substantial loosening of the rules of engagement that we had previously imposed on ourselves, right? These were limits that we ourselves took on. And in some ways, they were stricter than other armies fighting asymmetrical wars have taken on. So we had to loosen the rules of engagement if we were going to fulfill the goals of this war.
I know this follow-up question is obvious to our listeners, but I feel compelled to say it. The premise of establishing any set of rules is that, to some degree, one hopes that they apply to all parties. And this idea that Israel's being held to standards of international law when it is fighting a defensive war against an enemy, Hamas, which is, again, I think there tends to be this characterization of Hamas as sort of this ragtag militia. It is not a ragtag militia. It has been the governing body in Gaza over several million.
So, what threat is Israel suffering right now? Well, Israel still gets bombed by Hamas and still gets bombed by the Houthis. So, millions of Israelis periodically have to go shelter in bomb shelters while the Houthis launch missile attacks from thousands of miles away.
Palestinians, it has built up over years the equivalent of a light infantry army of a sovereign state that was organized with 24 to 26 battalions and a command and control structure and a hierarchy. And it was a semi-modern military, backed, by the way, by major, well-financed and sophisticated sponsors, i.e. the Islamist regime in Iran. And so this is who Israel's up against. However, it's not like this body was operating under any kind of international law. I mean, Israel tries to obviously minimize civilian casualties of its own citizens, and it has been trying to minimize civilian casualties of Palestinians to the extent that it can while it fights this war. And it's fighting an enemy that is trying to maximize civilian casualties of Israelis. And as we now know from intelligence intercepts of Yahya Sinwar, maximizing Palestinian civilian casualties was part of his strategy. Even you cited the Russia-Ukraine war earlier. As diabolical as Vladimir Putin is, no one thinks that he has as a military objective maximizing Russian civilian casualties in his war against Ukraine. Here, Israel is fighting an enemy that was trying to maximize civilian casualties of Sinwar's own people, of the Palestinian people. So this idea of international law when Israel's fighting this kind of enemy is, to me at least, preposterous.
Look, morally, the nature of the enemy that Israel is fighting on all fronts is qualitatively different than what we see in most conflicts around the world. And you asked me at the beginning of this conversation how I reacted to the Times report, and my visceral reaction was, we've just learned that there is a mass grave in Syria with over 100,000 bodies, and these investigations didn't happen in real time. And Assad was a welcome guest in capitals around the world. If Assad had appeared on university campuses before his ouster, he would not have gotten the treatment that Israeli leaders get on American campuses. So my visceral reaction is, how dare you place us under a microscope and give a pass to those who really are practicing genocide? That's not a critique of the journalists who wrote this piece. I think they're doing their job. This is a major story. I fault the Times for turning this into this major story, major expose, and the obsessiveness with Israel's moral behavior, again, while giving a pass to so many others who truly are genocidal. But that's only one half of what I have to say. That's what I have to say to our critics outside. And what I need to say to myself and our friends who, for the purpose of this conversation, are really part of us, those who support us, are kind of honorary Jews. They're part of our camp.
I think that's a big part of the Call Me Back community. We have data on the number of non-Jewish listeners to Call Me Back, which is surprising to Elon and me, that the large number of non-Jews. And yet I agree with you, Yossi. They're non-Jews, but they're in our camp. They're in our community, metaphorically speaking. And
we really should internalize that and appreciate that we're actually not alone, because it so often feels that way, especially when you're under assault by a lynch mob. But in our own internal conversations, I think we do need to look at that report and say, well, maybe at the beginning of the war, we went a little too far. Maybe, and if you look at the trajectory of civilian casualties that the article lays out, within 2 months after the war, civilian casualties were down by more than half. And so there is a question here that we need to ask ourselves. Now, of course, this notion of an internal private Jewish conversation in the age of media transparency is an illusion. But for our own integrity, I think we need to develop two languages on Israel. The first is how we speak to those who try to criminalize the Jewish state. And there the language is unequivocal rebuke and contempt. And at the same time, we need an internal language in which we're able to ask ourselves, well, okay, we're better than Assad, we're better than Putin, but what are the standards that we really want to hold ourselves accountable to, even under these impossible situations. And, we can't have it both ways. We love to flatter ourselves and say we're the most moral army in the world. No, I think that phrase is actually ludicrous because there's no way to measure that. Are we more moral than the Finnish army? I don't know. The Finnish army has never been in a position that we're in of fighting an existential war against terrorists who are embedded in a civilian population, et cetera, et cetera. So I think we need to free ourselves from the pat on the back, we're the best, we're the most moral army in the world. And I just want us to be doing the best we can under impossible circumstances. I don't need for us to be the most moral army in the world, because then we get into this pathological loop where we promote ourselves as the most moral army, and our critics say we are the new Nazis. And my sense is that neither category is useful in trying to understand what Israel is up against.
Well, but what about this idea that Israel's response, in part, I mean, now that we're getting into this, I'll go there. I don't believe this to be true, but there is this criticism that Israel's response was not just strategic and was not just offensive, but was also a form of retribution. By the way, I have a lot of friends in the Arab world, particularly in the Sunni Gulf, who these are friendly criticisms of me because I go on television in the U.S. constantly to make the case that Israel is the David here, is not the Goliath, and that Israel is fighting, as you're saying, under these impossible circumstances, and is doing the best it can, and is trying to minimize civilian casualties as it fights this enemy that has genocidal ambitions against it, and it's a seven-front war, and a ring of fire, and it's being squeezed, and et cetera, et cetera. I make all these points, and my friends in the Arab world said to me, why are you being defensive? He said, Israel's, I mean, I quote here, these are, this is a slight deviation from our PG standard here on Call Me Back. Israel's kicking ass, and they should be kicking ass because that's the only thing that is understood in the Middle East. So if you look at the areas, as Matti Friedman has said on this podcast in the past, as Matti Friedman has said, look at the areas where Israel has withdrawn from over the last 40 plus years or 30 plus years. It's withdrawn from Gaza, it's withdrawn from southern Lebanon, and it's withdrawn from parts of the West Bank. In every one of those areas, Israel is back today fighting in all of those areas. And Israel's withdrawal from those areas looked weak. Israel withdrawing from southern Lebanon in 2000, in Hezbollah's eyes, looked weak. Israel's withdrawal from Gaza in 2005, in Hamas's eyes, looked weak. So Israel needs to be back in those areas. Israel is back in those areas. And again, to quote them, and Israel's, kicking ass and taking names. And that's the only thing the region understands.
All right, so our dilemma is that we need to be perceived in the Middle East as Goliath and in the West as David. and post-October 7th, at least initially, it was kind of reversed.
It used to be taken for granted that civilians, of course, they're going to accept the repercussions that come to their state. And Gaza effectively operates as a state. It wasn't just Hamas who invaded Israel October 7th. It was Gaza that invaded Israel. And of course, Gazans are then going to bear responsibility and have to accept the consequences of what Gazans did on October 7th. All right, citizens and their state tend to share the same fate. All right, Laura Loomer here, talking with Steve Bannon.
Laura, certain aspects of this have, one of my concerns is that people don't appreciate, when we say America first, we're talking about the nation. And a nation has borders, a nation has customs and tradition, a nation has most importantly its citizens. It's our greatest resource. And you have in Silicon Valley what I call kind of the Medicis or the Borgias, this kind of network. They want to get back to kind of the city-states, Florence and Venice of Renaissance Italy. I refer to this as techno-feudalism, and I know that it's one of the things that you've been driving. Explain to people when you say this is a feudalistic system, or you want certain parts of this to be like feudal sociopathic overlords. What do we mean by that, ma'am?
Well, you have to understand the philosophy that all of these tech bros and the technocratic tyrants and the billionaires who come from this very oppressive society in Silicon Valley subscribe to in order to understand what their long-term goals are for infiltrating the White House. And so it really all begins with the fact that they subscribe to a neo-reactionary political movement, otherwise known as dark enlightenment. And essentially what that means is that they want society to operate like like a corporation. They believe that the most high IQ people, the tech elites, the wealthiest people in our country should be the people who are leading our society. And so what they really want is they want a country that operates like a corporation with a CEO monarch. And so you have people who have unlimited resources, billionaires in Silicon Valley, who are controlling the flow of information, who subscribe to a philosophy that is really trying to advocate for the elimination of democracy, the elimination of a constitutional republic, and the implementation of monarchy in America. And Peter Thiel subscribes to this, and I really do believe that people like Elon Musk subscribe to this ideology. J.D. Vance, who is now the incoming vice president, has also subscribed to this ideology, and you can see that he's actually spoken out about how he supports dark enlightenment. And what we need to have a conversation about is, what is it going to mean for the future of our country, our national security, and the incoming Trump administration if we have a bunch of technocrats who are also essentially welfare queens because their companies are receiving government subsidies and they want to take over our defense industry. If you have a bunch of tech bros with billions of dollars and direct unfettered access to the vice president and the president of the United States, and then they are also, very cordial with our adversaries, as in China and Iran. We see that Elon Musk is having these meetings off the books with Iranian officials, with Chinese officials. What does that mean for us and the future of our constitutional republic?
Okay, hang on. Yeah, okay, hang over a second. I want to go back because I missed JD on dark enlightenment. First off, explain to us again, because we love nomenclature and putting out, because ideas have consequences. When you say this construct, dark enlightenment, what is it? What does it mean? Where did it come from? Put some meat on the bone.
Well, as I said before, it's this idea that society should operate as a corporation and the elite should be in charge. And so one of the brain children behind this philosophy is a guy by the name of Curtis Yarvin. And I don't know how much time I have really to explain all of this, but Curtis Yarvin, of course, receives his funding from Peter Thiel. Peter Thiel was a big backer of J.D. Vance's Senate campaign, and he claimed to have been a big supporter of President Trump. Yet several months before the election, when he was speaking in the UK and he was asked point blank whether or not he was going to be supporting the incoming Trump administration and if he was going to be voting for President Trump and J.D. Vance, he really just had this kind of stutter attack, as he often does, where he profusely stuttered on stage and really just seemed incapable of answering a very simple question: will you be voting for President Trump and J.D. Vance? So it's very concerning, because these guys, what they want to do is they want to basically incite a civil war in our country. I believe that they want this idea of tech feudalism to create so much conflict with the nationalist MAGA base, so that it kind of sparks a civil war, which is what it's being called now, right? A MAGA civil war. And they want to flame these nationalist, the tensions that are created by this shift in the nationalist movement of our party.
This is not a civil war because they're not tough enough. They're just not. They folded. I mean, it was embarrassing. Oh, we're going to fight to the death. We're going to do this. We're going to do this. We're going to see war that you've never seen before. And then the next tweet, well, we know it needs to be reformed, but we're just talking about 0.0. No, you don't. Let me go back to Curtis Yarvin. He's a quite brilliant guy. Walk me through. We got about a minute here, and then I'll hold you through Raheem Ghassan's. Tell me about Yarvin.
Well, we can have a much greater conversation at this at a later time. I really want to focus, though, on the tech tyrants, and I want to talk about how Elon Musk and Peter Thiel and how a lot of these Silicon Valley billionaires.
Lar.
Well, as I said before, he's one of the brain children behind dark enlightenment theory.
Laura Loomer, why are the strong, the people that are worth hundreds of billions of dollars, and Elon's pretty upfront, he wants to be the first trillionaire, that he spends his time, as Allison Wynn, who spent personal time with him, focus on saving humanity by getting it to Mars, a colony on Mars. Somebody that deals at that level with it. Why is he afraid of Laura Loomer, ma'am?
Well, I think that a lot of people have a hard time speaking truth to power, and a lot of people are afraid of taking on billionaires. And he is the richest man in the world.
So I had a 40-year-old girlfriend who had a very negative reaction to being called ma'am. So Laura Loomer, I think, is in her early 30s. I suspect she doesn't love being called man.
World. And so he kind of orbits President Trump. As I called him the other day, I said he's a stage 5 clinger. And the reality is that a lot of President Trump's advisors, and people can deny this all they want, and a lot of people are not going to say this because they're dependent on their Twitter monetization checks, which is why Elon Musk has, well, I've been demonetized now. I've had my check mark taken away. They realize that, well, their input to President Trump is now being overshadowed by the richest man in the world who has these ulterior motives. So,
all right, let's get Kip back onto the show. Kip, what's going on, man?
Hey, not much. You doing okay tonight?
Yes, sir.
Everybody get their dogs and cats in tonight. I imagine more dogs and cats are lost on New Year's Eve and July the 4th. More so than any other day. And that's a terrible thing for them to get scared enough to leave home and they get lost. But it happens so much. But anyway, earlier you were Israel. It's enough to make a man go crazy. And I'm not even a Jew. You know what I'm saying? It's been the story of my life.
And what if there was like a dramatic reduction in Israel talk, would that help your blood pressure?
It would, because I mean, it's just, I mean, go back to even when my dad was born in 1940. The whole decade was, what are we going to do with these people? What are we going to do with these people? And then we'll just shove them over somewhere else. Like I told you, Section 8 housing. We're out there they're welcome with the new neighbors. What are we going to do with them? What are we going to do with them? I mean, goddamn, we're going to have to thaw out Antarctica for them, Luke, before it's all over with. It'll be after gallons and trillions of gallons more bloodshed. Don't get me wrong. There's got to be a lot more blood spilled between now and then. But I don't even know if Antarctica will be safe. That will find a way to somehow fuck up the foliage down there or something. I don't know. Have you ever seen anything like it? You ever seen a group? I know gypsies probably have their little idiosyncrasies that drive people a little bit bananas. But what would that be? Would they run a close second to the Jews as far as just getting under the skin of the neighborhood?
I don't know, but do you imagine that the Middle East without Israel would be some idyllic place?
Geez, gotta be better. It'd have to be better.
Okay, so Israel came around in 1948. So I don't know why I'm getting feedback. I'm getting feedback from you.
From me?
On your mic. I don't know what's going on there.
Let me check my plug. My plug.
Yeah. So plug and unplug, bro.
Oh, okay. Let me plug and unplug then.
Plug and unplug. Great solution to a lot of problems.
Yes,
okay.
Yes.
Okay. Yep. The problem's gone. Okay. So the Middle East is the location for the world's many, probably most of the world's most backward and barbarous countries. And that's true without the state of Israel in the midst. So I don't think it's Israel's fault that almost all the countries in the Middle East are incredibly backward and barbarous.
I mean, what was the excuse before? You know?
Exactly. Prior to 1948, there was no Israel, and the Middle East was a backward, barbarous place. So,
but it didn't dominate your headspace, Luke Ford. You get what I'm saying? It didn't dominate your headspace. It didn't dominate. You know, it wasn't used as some cudgel for all manner of evil. So I don't know, Luke. I don't want to bum you down on a New Year's Eve show. But
I don't care. It doesn't. My happiness does not depend on your perspective on Israel. So you're free to have any view on Israel that you want.
Well, I don't know. It's almost like they're little magicians that kind of bring stuff into being. You can remember that words like Holocaust, they started throwing them around in 34, 35, 36. They just whooped it right into existence. You get what I'm saying? It's kind of
You're
like
saying
me.
that Jews are very good at telling stories.
I didn't say that. I didn't
That
say
is
that.
what you said.
I'm saying they started using terms like Holocaust loosely all through the 30s, through the media over there in Europe, and then lo and behold, guess what manifested? What manifested by the 40s? Say it
So
enough.
we had mass genocides prior. We had mass genocides prior to the 1930s. So what's your point? Jews are very effective at telling stories.
And 10-4, very effective with the narratives too, aren't they, Luke Ford? You try. I bet you 6 in 10 people can't even name the what is it, Homalodor or whatever. It's like nobody else's stories even count.
So is it the Jews' fault that the Ukrainians haven't been able to tell effective stories about their own suffering?
Is it the Jews' fault?
Yeah, that Ukrainians haven't told effective stories about their own suffering.
Do you think I should start piling on to the Jews? Geez, they've got enough to atone for, don't you think?
I don't see why it's the Jews' fault that other groups haven't effectively told their own stories.
Oh, you're the one that talked about Jews in Ukraine. I don't know. I've already told you. I think that's all about natural resources there, my friend. And it's so many pay grades above us. All you're going to get's the propaganda, just like me.
Well, you're not addressing my point, so I'll say it again. Why is it the Jews' fault if non-Jews cannot effectively tell their own stories?
You've got something there. Jews, they like to take something and sort of like a prism, try to look at it from 42 different ways. Why every other type of person, most people, go out and try to like build something, so I don't know. As you can see, it works to their favor.
Hey, when you were at that all-black school, did you play sports?
I did.
And how was that experience?
I told you I was the only white guy on the football team for 2 years.
Yeah. And how did that go?
I mean, it went okay. D white boy. That was, but the D just meant like the white boy. That's what D white boy meant. And as I got older, it changed to D white man. Everybody's got, I would have rather them call me Kip, right? But that's not what the street does it, Luke? It assigns you a name, and you are branded. So it could have been worse, D white boy. Would that have been a bad one?
Well, I mean, let's be real. If one group dominates a particular area of life, then everyone else, if they want to play in that sandbox, they're going to have to conform to the dominant group. And that's as true when Christians are dominating, or when blacks are dominating, or homosexuals are dominating, or Jews are dominating. You want to be the dominator. It's much better to be the dominator than to be dominated, unless you're a bottom.
10-4. Hats off to Mike Malzahn for rejecting your attempt at pigeonholing him as a doomer. He did a couple of judo moves to stay right out of that, didn't he? Did you catch that 2 days ago when Mr. Malzahn called you?
I remember he called me. Don't have strong memories of what you had to say, but he's good at the gentle and gentile art of verbal self-defense. He gentiled me down, Kip.
It happens, bro. It happens. Luckily, YouTube will allow you to say such things. I heard you saying earlier that you had basically, and I've heard you say this before, that you had basically curtailed your speech just 24 hours a day in your whole life to live within the YouTube algorithm guidelines. And, I guess worse things could happen. But to me, it seems kind of restrictive, kind of like the religions. And that's the thing I hate about propaganda, Luke, and the way things go, is when I can tell that it's jumped into my head and I've had my guard up the whole time, but I could see me curtailing my own thoughts. Oh man. It makes me want to go the other direction and like call Luke up and tell him how I really feel about the Jews not being able to get along with their neighbors. You get what I'm saying? It spurns a phone call.
I do, but I think it's these particular acts of propaganda that make you mad when you notice that they have encoded themselves in your own system. What you don't realize is that virtually nothing of what you think is unique to you. Virtually everything that you think is being implanted in you by your community.
Yeah, you say that. That's why I tell you, there's a price to be paid for everything. You know, there's you think a lot of these things that eating up the culture, you know, indulging in it, having a good time with it, that there's not a price to be paid. And you're very wrong about that. You know, hopefully in your case, it's not a deep price or whatever, but there's a price to be paid for that. In the same way that you would say, flip that back at me and tell me my isolation, there's a price to be paid with that. But, you know.
What percentage of your thoughts do you think are your own rather than implanted in you by outside forces?
Unfortunately, it's the connection of the thoughts that make it unique, because you're just a collage of those inputs. Look forward. That's why I'm telling you, beware of just opening it up and saying, hey, I'm going to play the game, because there's a price to be paid for that. So I think you're right about the fact that there's not so many independent thoughts, but that's where the intersection of like genius and crazy comes in, is the way you associate them and make the connections. You agree with that? You know, sometimes you get a little bit out in front of your skis, start making connections that aren't there. Next thing you know, you're a Jim Jones or a Charlie Manson, got something on your forehead, you know, that sort of thing.
So I'll ask the question again. What percentage of your thoughts do you think are unique to you?
The thoughts themselves, very few. So that's why it matters what you're pouring in.
It doesn't matter whether or not you join a community, your thoughts overwhelmingly are not going to be your own. That you're going to think differently depending on your communal setting, whether or not you consciously decide to join a community.
You're saying communal setting, and I'll just say inputs. The inputs matter.
Yeah, we're all a child of our age and of our geography and of our genetics and of our early imprinting.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. You know, the other day you talked about your IQ starts to fade like by 22, 23.
Well, it doesn't fade, it diminishes after about age 20 or so, yeah.
To me, that's a fade, my brother. But anyway, I went and took 3 of those cockamamie online IQ tests just to see. And, you know, one of them called me a midwit. Pissed me off. 118 is that's a midwit, isn't it?
118, that's above 18 points above normal. So that's a college graduate.
Nah, it ain't worth the shit though. This particular one, the one that was low, I thought too low. I looked at the constituency of the test, and it was all like visual spatial. Well, no shit. That's the thing that when I was 17, 18 years old and took the test, that's the one that they told me you're only a 119 in that anyway. You know what I'm saying? There was no word associations. There was no definitions. There was no arithmetic reasoning. None of the stuff I'm good at. None of that shit was in there.
You should probably hire a Jew to take this type of test for you.
Yeah, that's just it. I remembered 1 or 2 of the questions, because like I say, I took 3 of them, and by God, they're so short. It took me really the first one. I think what may have happened with the one that the Mensa, that's the first one I went to. And I don't know if you've ever done this before, but you got to adjust your thinking for the test. I think it's so damn abstract. You got to stop thinking like the way you normally think and kind of go into kind of like a more of a Zen state and make yourself a little bit more open to the nuances of each of those stupid boxes that they've got set beside one another. So I don't know. I think the first one, was very heavy in those areas. And the second and third one, I had kind of caught on. I had kind of that they were asking more all around stuff. Where I think the first one like cared more, and they're doing that just the way they took the IQ tables out of the psychology books in 2011. They're going to do that. Mark my words. They're going to start talking about emotional EQ and your ability to like be compassionate towards other and work together on projects. They're going to refashion what the fuck IQ is. Mark my words. They're probably already doing it, Luke Ford. What do you suspect I'm right or wrong on this?
I think IQ is a useful tool. Some of it is more visual spatial. Some of the tests, others are more verbal. What was the highest score that you got?
They were 125, 120, and 119.
Okay, that sounds about right.
I'm sorry, 118. 119 is what I used to be, and 118 is what this Mensa. But there again, every one of those tests were the visual spatial things where you're taking a cube and connecting it together. Like I say, it was not reflective, and it was not called an IQ test. Their free test was just called intelligence. So whatever that, to me, that was close enough. I clicked on it. And again, there was like a bit of a learning curve because I think the whole thing was time tested. And I spent like the first 6 minutes, every time I would try to I couldn't see the answer and the question. So when I would scroll down to the answer, that stupid test would go question 2, question 3, question 4. And I'd be like, oh my God, what's going on? I really needed an Elliot Blatt type person, but it took me about 60 seconds to realize you're going to have to scale down the picture. So I went 90%, 80%, 70%, 60%, where I could finally see both question and answer on the same page. But the damn thing was timed, so I think that might have gotten held against me. Not a big deal.
Were you high when you took it?
Is it pig's tail pork, Luke Ford?
Yes.
Okay.
So if you weren't high, you'd probably be 130.
Nah. I am with math. I was over that with math, but I'm tilted. My brain's tilted like that. Like when you and I are following together, I can follow along with you. I understand all the definitions of all the words you give out and all that kind of stuff. But that's where the weed affects me, is sometimes when I'm trying to give you back an answer, the first choice that I'm looking for doesn't come to mind, and so you catch me fumbling. Well, I don't know if you catch me, but I'm fumbling for a second or third word choice because there's a bit of a little absence there. So, there's a price to be paid, but also flip side is the creativity. Washington. You might get a word that I wasn't planning on using. Every once in a while, the second word is better than the word you had planned on. But anyway, you had a gal on the other day. You remember her name, the girl from North Carolina? She said she was near Asheville.
Vaguely.
Oh, okay. She had just, I don't know. She had said that I would describe it as kind of an in the wilderness type of a feeling. Again, sort of like Ricardo was feeling, sort of disillusioned, but I don't think she had the circle around her where she could confide these things and speak these things. So she was kind of like on her own in the abyss. But I think she has a husband and 4 kids, so she wasn't completely alone. But it really sort of reminded me of that's the way I felt in 2007 after 5 months of whatever, and had sort of become an ascetic, a monk, or whatever, because all of a sudden I didn't know what had happened there. Was my left brain talking to my right brain? Was this some sort of a cosmic helper? Had I got out beyond my skis? But I kept looking at the net result, and the net result was fearlessness, ego gone, no desires. The desires that I had before, they were just all gone. The first things I noticed is the Taco Bell and all the little things along out there in consumer land that had some effect on me before. I didn't realize they had some effect on me before, but there was no effect on me now, so it took me. That's why maybe you heard me mention Joseph Campbell one time. I was in the wilderness like your friend in North Carolina was, And I heard Joseph Campbell saying something along the effects of the ego, desires, and fears. He said something like transcendence of these is the passageway to the temple. And I was like, now that's weird, because you know, I had been to a lot of churches around here where they speak in tongues and, you know, just all kinds of different churches. And didn't nobody speak like that. So it kind of gave me like a starting place to try to like get myself out of the wilderness. Tell me you've had situations like that where you've like been in the wilderness and you've like needed a helping hand or somebody point me in the right direction so I can make sense of this new constitution that, you know, try to reconstitute what's going on here.
Yeah,
You ever had that feeling?
definitely been vulnerable and someone else has picked me up, or I've got a headache and I'm tired and I just can't get going, and I have a cup of coffee and I feel amazing. So I'm not an island. Other people enter my life, other substances enter my life and improve it.
Mm-hmm. Speaking of improving your life, have you got any of those 2025 goals while you're thinking about that? Remember I told you that Epicurus, I was a big fan of Epicurus, and he had a real simplistic formula for happiness, which was friends, freedom, and constant reflection. And I added a fourth one. It's just so happens to be that it's New Year's Eve, and the fourth one I had added was meaningful and measurable goals. You know, so now's the time that you and I got to kind of decide for ourselves that trajectory. You know, what are we going to do? Because to me, the worst Decembers are when you've gone through the year and all you've done is marked time, you know, and you can see that the trajectory was not up. Of course, it's even worse when the trajectory is down, but you get that feeling. You know, this is the time of year where you take stock. Do you find yourself doing that here over the past week or so?
No. First of all, New Year for me was Rosh Hashanah. Second, I don't put a great deal of stock in goals, because goals narrow your focus and they tempt you to cut corners. So setting goals is not on my list of priorities.
Mm-hmm. You know, a lot of people get they use the term Epicureanism. I think they use it wrong, because they use it as like, you know, fancy food and living the high life and that kind of stuff. But he meant it more like what you were talking about maybe 15 or 20 minutes before I called, where you were talking about like the feeling that you have with friends. Epicurus felt like if that's the way you feel, you grab those friends, those 8 or 10 friends, and make a life for yourself together, where you're spending, you know, where you're eating dinner together and you're doing activities together. I guess you would call him maybe a pro-commune guy. And incidentally, guess who did their dissertation on Epicurus? Take a guess. Karl Marx. Are you there? Did I cut out, Luke?
Oh, there I go. I faded out. Okay. Sorry, I don't know what
Okay.
happened.
I don't know if you heard me or
Yes, I heard
if
you. I heard you.
Oh, okay. Go ahead. Give me your thoughts on that then.
If you want to spend a lot of time around friends, go to synagogue.
Mm-hmm. But I don't think you're necessarily a commune guy, but you can appreciate Epicurus's thoughts that.
Well, I am a commune guy because I belong to an Orthodox synagogue where for years I'd go twice a day and see my friends twice a day.
You're saying commune as in the root of community, aren't you, my friend? Sort of using in that regard?
Correct.
Okay. And did you catch the part about Marx's dissertation being on Epicurus?
Yeah, I heard everything you said.
Okay. 10-4. Okay. But no 2025 goals that you want to share with the class
No,
so far?
I don't believe in goals, because goals narrow your focus while you should be more alive to the moment, and they also tempt you into shortcuts. And my New Year's was Rosh Hashanah. It was 3 months ago.
Oh, so your goals started in October?
No, I don't set goals. I don't put stock on setting goals.
Whatever you're flipping the dial, flipping over for the new year. Was that what, October 1st? When is that?
It changes. You're talking about the Gentile calendar. I'm on the Hebrew calendar, bro. I don't know these. I don't know these Goyish dates and like Gregorian stuff. So our
Well, you
Rosh
said it was
Hashanah
3 months
began
ago.
October 2nd.
Oh, okay. I said October 1st. I guess I was off a day. Well, let's put it this way. One of the things I want for you, and I think you want for you, is a significant other in the future, right?
Yes.
Okay. What are the things that Luke Ford can do in 2025 to best position himself, to make that happen?
Anything
you
I can do to become more at ease with myself, to be more honest with myself, to have more clarity on myself, will automatically translate into improved relations with other people. And it's very difficult to have improved relations with other people without also improving your economic state and without bringing more people into your life. As you bring more people into your life, you're more likely to bring a potential spouse into your life. But it all starts with increasing clarity and honesty about oneself.
Yes,
so it's
but
not about taking action. It's about lying there, right? I sometimes taking action is a great thing, but more often than not, just staying stationary and getting clarity and honesty about what's coming up for you is more important than taking action.
You alluded to sharing more. Maybe you overshare with the gals. Have you thought about being a little bit more mysterious?
Yes, I keep it zipped now.
Oh, you do? Okay. All right. Yeah, I used to have a problem. First time I had to manage, I guess it was a mortgage company. I was like 24 years old and didn't really understand the concept. And I noticed I had sat through like three interviews with prospective loan officers, and I had done more talking than they had done. You want to let them know what you expect, but at the same time, you're there to like receive information from them. You're not supposed to be doing them most of the talking. So I don't know. You're saying the same thing happens sometimes with you and women, where you should be doing less talking, being a little bit more mysterious.
It's not about performance. It's about me, who I am. So once again, the more clarity and honesty I have about who I am, the better I will relate to other people, including a potential spouse. It's not like you can just go out there and find a spouse and create a great relationship. Your spouse is going to be a reflection of who you are. So if you're troubled, if you're dishonest, you're ill at ease with reality and with yourself, only possible relations that are open to you are people who are equally troubled. On the other hand, if you are increasingly honest and clear with regard to yourself and increasingly at ease with yourself, then you will be much more likely to attract someone who is also honest, and therefore you have the chance of building something good. You're never going to build something good when you're living all sorts of lies in your own life.
Right. Back in either 7th or 8th grade, I remember a parent was like so mad at me one time, and besides my stepmother, I think this is only the second time. This was only the second person that I thought like despised me. And like you say, as long as you're being clear and honest and open, well, what's the fucking problem? But the problem was this. The guy had a kid, this grown-up had a kid, and we got off on the bus stop together. And the father had been a baseball card fan, and he had like 1958, 1959, 1960, and 1961 baseball cards. And he had all the good ones, all the Hank Aaron's, the Stan Musials, Ernie Banks, you name it, he had it. And so I would just take an extra $1 or $2 every day and get off the bus stop. And I had convinced his son that he would rather have $1 for each one of those baseball cards. And we could just do that 2 at a time. And we could just do it every day, from now to eternity, if he was comfortable doing that. And somewhere along the way, 100 or so cards into it, the dad found out, was that a me problem? Or was that a dad problem, not coaching up his son the right way, Luke Ford? We're looking back.
Well, that was a you problem when you're taking advantage of people. That doesn't tend to work out well.
$1 has intrinsic value right there at the bus stop. He can go to hell. Back then, a candy bar was only like 29 cents.
And how much were these baseball cards worth that you were paying $1 for?
I mean, to the right person, Luke Ford, maybe they were worth 100, 150 a piece, but that's the right person. The stars have to align for such a thing. That dollar, when you're thirsty or hungry, is a hell of a lot better than that piece of cardboard that you're just going to put in your bicycle and make noises with. Am I right, Luke Ford?
No, you're wrong. You're sharpening your skills at ripping people off.
Some told me, Paris, the thought that I would have made a good Jew, but I don't know what they're talking about, Luke. I have no idea what they're talking about. But anyway, you had talked, I think you had a walk and talk today, and I watch them occasionally because I'm waiting for the day that you get, I mean, you do give out pearls of wisdom, but really, I'm waiting for the day where you get mugged or something. Hopefully not anything worse than that. It's going to be good. You know, you're going to blow up and it's going to go viral like a Hawk Tuah moment or something, but it's going to happen. Because I noticed some of those areas you walk around are posh, but some of those areas got dirty, cracked concrete, and like safety fences around everything. Kip knows what time it is. I know you every once in a while you're walking in some sketchy areas, aren't you, 10-4, Luke Ford?
I'm usually walking around in a Jewish neighborhood, and you don't tend to fear for your life when you're walking through a Jewish neighborhood.
Back in about 84, maybe 85, I had the most beautiful Pinto rally. Now you would say, Pinto, God, those were garbage. But I didn't say I had a Pinto. I said I had a Pinto rally, and that was with the E on the end of it. So it was a hell of a car. But anyway, I was at the mall one day. Now this is a follow-up on your story on a walk and talk about you got to be careful, be it billionaires or whoever, the toes you're stepping on or what you're doing, because it might be the wrong person to do it. And I would say you spoke about billionaires on your walk, but I would say flip that coin. And if you anybody that has nothing to lose is a problem. Do you agree with at that end of the spectrum too, Luke Ford?
Well, it depends how capable they are. Yes, but people with nothing to lose are dangerous.
Right. That's why if I've told you this before, when you're in a blacker neighborhood, life is cheap there. And that's not me like reflecting on them. I'm just saying you're in an area where you can get killed over a pair of tennis shoes or something. So life is cheap. That's not going to happen in Westwood. You know, you're not going to get killed over a pair of tennis shoes like you would have maybe in Compton 30 years ago. But anyway, so I was at the mall and some guy, incidentally enough, his nickname, he had two nicknames. Thievin Steven was one of his nicknames, and the other one was Dirty Steve. But this is long before I knew he had these nicknames. But I caught this guy taking a jacket out of my car, this beautiful Pinto Rally. I had a jacket inside of it, a jean jacket, and he took this jacket out of my car. So I was like, what manner of craziness is this? So I stewed on it at the mall. What to do? I was basically thinking, what would Luke Ford do? You know what I'm saying? Luke Ford, Jesus, the greats, what would they do? So I figured out what I was going to do. I waited till the sun went down, and I knew where this guy lived. And I called a friend, Scott, and I called another friend, Travis, and I bribed them with like a 12-pack of beer because I had the ability to get beer even though I was underage. And we went right up to his house. And who knows what we would have done if he was there. But he wasn't there. I didn't feel like he would be there. He wasn't there. I knew right where his bedroom was because what Steve didn't realize is I had been at a party at his house before. I knew exactly where he lived. I knew where his bedroom was. I sent Scott and Travis into his bedroom and took every stitch of clothing out of his bedroom. They wanted to take his alarm clock, his ghetto blaster. They wanted to clean him out. But I said, no. This is a purpose punch. You're just getting all of the clothes, out of all of his drawer, all of his underwear, all of his socks. We're going to throw away what you don't want. And we did that. Was that over the line, or was that the lesson that fella needed at 16 years old to put himself on the right course?
Well, it depends on the community, the odds of someone with a gun coming up and retaliating if there's going to be a dangerous cycle of escalation. So it all depends on the community norms, and what are the probabilities of some dramatic escalation into something life-threatening?
Yes, his father was the independent life. You remember there used to be these things called independent life agents? Maybe you remember, maybe you don't. But anyway, he was the agent for our part of town. So I knew who his dad was. Like I say, I had been to his house at a party. Had his parents showed up, I would have just said, "Hey, is Steve around?" And it would not have been a problem. So I get what you're saying. It wouldn't have been worth taking a shotgun to the face, if that's what you mean. But
Yeah.
I kind of knew that wasn't going to be the situation. So anyway, if we knew that death wasn't a possibility, do you think it was a good lesson or a little bit over the line?
I don't have a strong opinion. I would expect escalation as a result of what you did, and I would ask, did you lock your car? Did you make it incredibly easy for this guy to lift a jacket out of your car? Probably that should have been the number one lesson that you deduced from it.
I had not. He had not used like a coat hanger or anything. I had left myself vulnerable like that, like a little bitch. God, you always find a way to spin it right back on me, look forward. That's why I pay you the big bucks for these little couch sessions, buddy. Which one of these following two statements is more accurate? Most Jews are atheists. Most Jews like to haggle. Which one of those is more? Which one of those is more
I
accurate?
would say an emendation of statement one. For most Jews in America, God does not play an important role in their life.
Mm-hmm. And most Jews like to haggle. That's more of a take it or leave it. It's more of a coin flip from what
that'd be
seem.
more Middle Eastern Jews, so probably a disproportionate number of Sephardic Jews, but a high number of I would expect a high number of other Jews would not enjoy haggling. So
Yeah.
middlemen, minority groups tend to be more at ease with bargaining than, say, those people of Northern European heritage.
Who was that? Andrew Silverstein. He played this sort of Vinny the Mook character. God, he filled up arenas in the 1980s. Can you think of who I'm talking about? Andrew Dice Clay. That's what his name was. He was famous. He'd like to haggle for everything. You know, every pair of shoes that he'd go out, everything. He was a haggler. So I don't know if he was a Middle Eastern Jew or whatever. But anyway, I was gonna ask you.
Okay, make this the final one. So go ahead.
Okay. Jeez, the final one. Well, that'll just give us time to talk later. You need to go ahead and move on to something else, I take it.
You could have asked me the question in the time that you did that.
Oh,
so just
okay,
ask me a final point or make a final point.
Okay, well, we could just end it on this one. I've noticed when I was younger, a couple of things would get into like a circle of friends, and they would like vacuum out all the money and like leave like a trail of, I don't know, unhappiness and despair. And I noticed it with gambling and with cocaine, probably with a couple of others, but I definitely noticed with those two. You ever notice that with a circle of friends, how a certain thing will get in there and it not only will it take all their money, but it'll leave them all in a state where they're all screwed up afterwards.
Right. If your friends are cheating on their spouses, you're more likely to cheat. If your friends are doing cocaine, you're more likely to do cocaine. If your friends are in a downward spiral, you're more likely to fall into a downward spiral. We are profoundly affected by the company we keep.
Mm-hmm. And we'll just do a teaser for later. I made up sort of a little Luke Ford, little sort of IQ test. So that's something you and I can play along later on. All
okay,
right.
sounds good. Talk to you later, man.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. So let's get back here to Laura Loomer talking with Steve Bannon.
As I said before, does he really support MAGA and the America First agenda, or is he trying to push this neo-reactionary political movement so that we can establish a monarchy and have multipolarity? So I think that he doesn't like the fact that somebody who has direct access to President Trump, as I do, and that's very well known, challenged him in a very public manner, and it's dominated the news cycle over these last few days. And so I don't think that that it's acceptable for George Soros, Elon Musk, or Peter Thiel. It doesn't matter what side of the political aisle a billionaire is on. I don't think that it's acceptable for billionaires to have this much power and this much access, so that not only are they going to have government access to our money and government influence, as we saw over the spending bill, by threatening primaries against people who don't comply with his wishes. But this is a guy who gets government subsidies for defense contracts and now wants to silence people who challenge him online. And I'm not the only account that was shut down. And they said, well, you were shut down because you doxed someone. Okay, well, it was an honest mistake if they want to say that I doxed somebody. And I have since issued an apology for not having all of the information blurred out for Seram Kirshan's finance record at the FEC that shows that he donated to Democrats a month before the presidential election. And I think that we should be able to criticize the tech elite, the tech bros. They're very triggered by the term tech bros, who are going to now have enormous amounts of power in the Trump administration, especially given the fact that these people are Johnny-come-latelys, okay? They all supported Ron DeSantis. First of all, they all supported Democrats. Then they supported Ron DeSantis. Then they supported Vivek Ramaswamy. And they only decided to support President Trump out of an act of sympathy when we almost watched President Trump's head explode with the bullet of an assassin on live TV in Butler, Pennsylvania. So, we need to have these conversations, and it's unfortunate that things have escalated the way that they have escalated, but we'll see. Hopefully I'm reinstated, and hopefully I'm remonetized.
Yeah. I think escalation's good. We get down to it. Remember, they're the ones backpedaling. And like I said, when an enemy's in retreat, fix bayonets and pursue. Laura, where do we go to get you on?
When I say it's unfortunate that things have escalated, it's unfortunate that the MAGA base has had to sustain abuse from the richest man in the world, being called retards and saying.
Okay, so the tech bros didn't throw in with Trump because he got shot. They decided to throw in with Trump long before that, and then they rallied to Trump's side after he was shot. But the decision was made well in advance.
F you in the face. Okay, so I just think.
Okay, so Laura Loomer can certainly dish it out. It's not surprising that people would be quite harsh in their responses. There was an excellent analysis of Curtis Yarvin on Decoding the Gurus. Let's play this excerpt from their December 25 show.
This somewhere, and unfortunately, I need a better historical researcher to dig this reference back up.
Look, cancel culture was in Soviet Russia, right? But it's not always the same, but there's parallels. But maybe if he tells a couple more stories, a few more anecdotes from history, this will all connect together, right?
Spoiler alert, everyone. It does not. But go on.
Yeah, I do feel some sympathy for Constantine and Francis, right? Because they're clearly like, okay, right, but let's try to answer, some of the things that we're saying.
Just one question. Let's try to answer just one thing. Yeah, I do have sympathy for them in this.
And you heard him there. He mentioned, he's got a story. So let's just hear a little bit more, Matt. He's going to bring it together.
I always advise people to watch the film Reds, which is a very, with Warren Beatty as John Reed, young John Reed, only American buried in the wall of the Kremlin. And you basically see these people with these insanely modern attitudes. They live like people in San Francisco. Their love lives are like the love lives of people in San Francisco. These are completely modern people, and they're a very small minority, and they basically set out to take power. So here's a couple of examples that are sort of a little outside of the normal space of anti-wokeness. So basically, this thing with the publishers is done, and this sort of kind of defines what it means to be mainstream media. What it means to be mainstream publishing is that you kind of went through this filtration, this coordination. It was a very different process in Nazi Germany, but this ideological coordination, which was centralized in Nazi Germany.
So Curtis Yarvin essentially cannot make coherent, pithy points. He just rambles and rambles from one example to another without many things falling into place.
Except for the CPUSA, which is long gone. It was decentralized in this country. Wokeness is decentralized, but it achieves the same purpose as, I'm going to butcher the German, Gleichschaltung, which is basically turning everything Nazi that, happened in the Third Reich. My favorite example of this is a wonderful writer, Victor Klemperer. Do you know the name? He was a Jew who survived the Third Reich because he was married to an Aryan, and his wife was his wife was an Aryan. He was a linguist. And so he wrote this wonderful book called Language of the Third Reich.
Yeah, it's the exact same. Jesus Christ, right? You just want, and like, I want someone to grab these guys and say, like, shut up, answer the question. No, you don't have like 8 minutes to give your
Laura, we got to
waffly
bounce.
bullshit
Social media.
answer. Just answer the question directly without going in indulgent tangents.
Don't tell us about Victor Klemperer. You're not allowed to talk about the movie Reds. You're not allowed to change the topic 3 or 4 times. Just answer the question. But this is the thing. We saw the same thing with Jordan Peterson, where he gets asked a question and you go on this magical mystery tour, segueing from semantic connection to semantic connection, until I feel like everyone's just forgotten what the question was or what we were talking about at the beginning. But we're just left with the impression of a an impressionist scattergun feeling that this person knows things.
Matt, even more in this case, this is 50 minutes into the episode, right? They're approaching the end of the interview, and they clearly haven't got anywhere, right? In like even just outlining his basic ideas, because he's been telling them stories for like 50 minutes, right? And you can hear the desperation in Constantine at this point. So he butts in as he's going on about this and like tries to say, okay, let's try to nail down. So just listen to this.
In Nazi Germany, you have Goebbels and his Ministry of Enlightenment, and he's like, you must be enlightened this way, that way, right?
But not just to translate your point into sort of simpler language, what you're saying basically is it's decentralized. No one is sitting at the top going, everyone must have equity and diversity. No one's doing that. But everyone must have equity and diversity.
But everyone must have. And so you have the same effect that Goebbels was trying to generate.
Yeah.
But the mechanism is totally different.
Right.
And it's a fascinating question of what this mechanism is.
Okay, cool. So we've got about 10 minutes left. I want to, before we move on to locals and have the conversation.
It's just hilarious. Hundreds of people will show up to listen to Curtis Yarvin meander and yammer and preen about all sorts of things he doesn't know much about.
Let's use the last 10 minutes in a little bit more succinct, concrete way to talk about that mechanism. Why is it that we're now obsessed with the German cat? Why is it that the same ideological positions are being pushed on everybody from corporations, the media?
Right, the poor hosts of trigonometry, all right, they're trying to press him, trying to push him. They're pleading with him to put together a coherent point.
Parliament down the road from here, the church, right? I mean, I could, the NHS, everyone is ad hoc to a particular worldview. And you can even believe that's a great worldview and it's exactly, everyone needs equity and diversity and whatever. How
what
is
is
that
the
happen?
mechanism?
How's that
What is
happen?
the mechanism? There's
Right, you got to set things up and then punch. Set up, punch. Set up, punch. Set up, punch. Come on, guys.
no more important question.
Cool. Let's take 10 minutes very specifically and talk about that.
That is the most important question of the time. And the answer is because we're not a monarchy. And let me be really, specific and clear about that.
He's just a waste of time.
So Constantine's painful performative laughter, very annoying, right? But also, I think it is sort of a genuine reaction because, like, his answer is, well, all of this is because we're not a monarchy, and he has obviously not done the grounds to justify that conclusion at all. So it's just a statement, like it's the exact same statement he made at the start that like he likes monarchies, right? And that's all there is to it. And it's even that premise that like everything in society is absolutely lockstep. There's no political disagreements. There's no debate in British society, no different political movements. It's not like the Conservatives had power for over a decade or anything like that. As Constantine says, everyone is completely agreed on the ideology that we all have to follow. So how did that situation come about?
Yeah, I feel like Constantine was grasping at straws there because he was feeling good because, like, thank God, we've finally got a topic we can all get on board on, that there's a woke orthodoxy. It's being enforced by this kind of groupthink. It's not being enforced but in the Nazi style, but it's a terrible thing. We need to understand how that's happening. Okay, tell us why. And it's monarchy.
Yeah, surprise! It's and like I feel that's a fake laugh from Constantine, but I also feel like, what else can he do? What can he do?
What can he do? And I was feeling so sorry for Francis with this because I just know, the situation that Francis is in, right?
Francis or Constance?
Francis.
Oh.
I'm feeling sorry for Francis now because Francis is tagging along. He's wanting to be a good Batman to Constantine.
Yeah.
He's being told we're going to be talking to a very important thinker. He's very clever. He's going to be telling us some exciting, dangerous ideas about whatever. And he's trying to ask every man questions. And the answers that he's getting must just baffle him even more. Like, he must just be sitting there utterly baffled by all of this, but assuming, I think, that it's all making sense, but in a way that's just over his head. And if I could speak to Francis right now, I'd tell him, mate, no, it's not going over your head. There's nothing there. You're confused because it's meaningless, not because you're not sophisticated enough. You are right.
Well, this is something that comes up in almost every interview with Curtis that I've seen. Right? People basically say, "Of course you're a genius," and like when he gives a winding answer which doesn't seem to make sense, they're like, "Well, yes, it's very interesting what you're saying. There's a lot to that. Maybe let's try to focus step by step." And they always act like the Emperor's New Clothes. We can't say, "But this is fucking stupid, Curtis. This is stupid. Like, you're just waffling nonsense." They can't say that because everyone's convinced he's the philosopher king of the neo-reactionaries. And the thing that gets me is they're all supposed to be about calling bullshit, saying, "Oh, look, there's nothing actually here. All this orthodoxy, all these people are afraid to call out someone when they're just waffling on." Kamala Harris or anyone, they just give these platitudes. And here they have someone who for 50 minutes has run like rampant, just telling them stories about Russia and Bolsheviks and Afghanistan and how it's a border region.
What would Elizabeth I think about things? I know,
Yeah.
and they give it a complete pass. Oh, what you're saying is tremendously interesting, very fascinating stuff. There's a lot to unpack there, but can you just walk us through the beginning? Because we're just simple folk, right? We're not on your level.
10 minutes left. Let's try to get just like 2 answers. Let's try to get direct answers. We can do it. And spoiler, they can't. They can't. Even with that framing that we're going to get answers. We're going to keep this simple on a single topic. Sorry, Curtis has other ideas. He's not letting you walk him to that path. So, well, let's see what he says.
And when those professors and journalists and civil servants, like my parents, are basically told what to do by politicians, let's say the politicians can even fire them, that's horrifying. That leads us down the road to Hitler. And so, the principle of this sort of, technocratic, meritocratic government is that the government should be ruled by experts. Mm-hmm. And the ideas of these experts exist in a marketplace of ideas, which is not the sort of democratic marketplace of ideas that gives us QAnon and, weird anti-vaxxer internet stuff. That's a terrible marketplace of ideas. Everything that people say about it is true. But the marketplace of ideas among informed experts. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And you're just like, how could this go wrong? And let me give you an example that has nothing to do with wokeness, nothing to do with the German
Hold on,
cat.
let me just work through what you're saying so that the logic is clear. Well, it's very easy to see how that goes wrong, because if the idea of democracy is essentially that you can get rid of the coach, right? Mm-hmm. If you don't like the coach, well, if the coach isn't actually in charge,
yes. If the coach actually isn't in charge, the wires leading to the election.
You can replace the coach, but the team is still going to be run the way that it's run.
By the managers, the trainers,
right.
Right. And so, and this is a very old thing. This is, American progressivism, essentially, from the early part of the century. Going back in history, you have this sort of Gilded Age system in America, very like China, very corrupt, very effective.
Right, Chris. So the mechanism and the problem with democracy is that you have this meritocratic, expert, deep state, I think, particularly Constantine was hinting at, which you can't change even by electing a different government. But they are beholden to the politicians. So I don't know. I'm struggling to follow the logic there. Can you?
Yeah, well, you remember he was explaining like why monarchy, and now he's getting into the details, and they're keeping it very specific. But you can hear Constantine trying to like provide simplified analogies, like before he jumps on to the next story about like a random historical account. He's like, well, let's just break down where we've got so far. And the thing with Yarvin is like what he wants, like he has the monarchy thing, but he also has like this view about technocratic elites, right? Kind of like Peter Thiel and Elon Musk in control of things. And that, so he does have this, worship towards a particular kind of expertise, if you want, or at least like presented expertise. But his argument is that that has been corrupted by, the systems of wokeness and progressivism and whatnot. They've made that system not function right, and like putting restrictions on capitalists and this kind of thing. Like all of it is not letting the great men of history properly run things. But so Yarvin is an elitist. He wants a technocratic monarchical elite. I think this is why what he's arguing for gets a bit messy, because there are lots of contradictions like when you dig into it.
Yeah, it's very confusing because sometimes these unelected technocratic elites are the good guys. Like I presume when they're like CEOs and in charge of corporations and stuff, and sometimes these unelected elites are the bad guys. And he seems to have a problem with the fact that you can change the coach, but it's not going to change that system. So yeah, it is a bit confusing. I guess what it boils down to is just kind of that romantic attachment to this great man or woman, in fairness, Elizabeth I you mentions, of history, and he just likes that kind of thing. These romantic, powerful figures who will do things and unfettered.
Well, I have a clip that will help clarify the distinction, and will also give our boy Francis another chance to shine with his, kind of crazy wisdom that he injects. So listen to this.
The farther you go back in progressivism, the more I like these people, and they're just like, this society should be ruled by the best people in it, and these people are manifestly not the best people. They are not the experts. They are not the smartest people.
But who gets to judge who the best people are, Curtis?
Well, at present, who gets to judge who the best people are these institutions.
Right.
And so let me basically, the meritocracy, essentially, now it gets corrupted by, all this race stuff or whatever. But, let me give you an example of a problem that we're all familiar with and the effect in this. And that example is COVID. You'll remember COVID. And you've probably had...
Yeah, I'd rather not remember it.
You've probably had COVID.
Yes.
And so I think it's fairly clearly established. It's not really a right-wing conspiracy theory. It's fairly clear that if it didn't happen, it could have happened. And here's how COVID happens. So first you have SARS-1, which basically jumps from a bat to a palm civet. It's very well established, very nasty disease. And this, SARS-1 is a problem. It almost escapes. It almost becomes COVID, and it kills about 20% of the people that have it. It makes Delta COVID, which was a nasty disease, look like the common cold. It's an important problem. The way science is funded, specifically science including, for example, virology. Virology is not social science. It's very clearly scientific. It's a hard science. And in the principle of the second half of the 20th century, the way that science is funded is sort of, consistent with this kind of government by experts principle, and the thing about an oligarchy is it almost looks like it's no government at all. It's just like, no, there's no power here. It's just science. It's not power. It's just science.
So there, Matt,
Look, a more sophisticated understanding of the United States is that it has elements of democracy, it has elements of oligopoly, it has elements of dictatorial rule. For example, the American president's foreign policy powers are pretty equal to those foreign policy powers of King George III. There are socialist elements to the United States. There are capitalist elements to the United States. We're not just an oligopoly. We're not just a republic. We're not just a democracy. We're not just socialism. We're not just capitalism. We have all these things operating at once.
We have the patented wafflearium, right? Like rolling around. He's now gotten into another example that he's going to use to explain things. That's COVID. And it's going to go more, right? You can already hear the beginnings of where this is going to go. And it's very much a very predictable, he says, well, it's not just a right-wing thing anymore, but he's about to outline like a lab leak scenario and the corrupt virology establishment, like essentially, Brett Weinstein plot. But so here he is saying that experts, like the true experts, should be in power, but there are these corrupt systems, which are institutions, that are getting in the way. And like an example of a corrupt institution is, science and the virologists, right? And so he's going to go on the big long tangent about COVID. But again, it's like, it's not actually proving anything unless you accept all these assumptions that he layers in. And as you'll see, he speaks very confidently about all this stuff about COVID. And if you actually have any reasonable grasp about the literature, he's providing the conspiratorial lab leak thing as if that's the cutting edge of science. And it isn't.
Yeah, this little story and anecdote about COVID, which, as you said, is going to be based on conspiracy theories, is the rationale for his monarchical scheme, which he never really describes. Like, he dodged the question. Francis there wanted to ask, hey, who chooses the aristocrats in this alternative political system you're proposing? Which is a good question, which he dodges. He goes, well, I'll tell you who chooses them at the moment. Whatever, Fauci or someone is choosing these virologists. Or presumably, we need Elon Musk and RFK Jr. to be sorting out stuff like COVID, because they're not going to be corrupt. Anyway.
Yeah,
yes.
I know. Well, let's continue down his road. So he's outlined. He's not even on COVID yet. He's actually on SARS, right? That's what he was waffling on about. But he'll get there. He'll get there.
Okay, I don't think I can take any more. Some smarter discussions, unbelievably, on Steve Bannon's War Room. Not my favorite source for news and views, but I like Batya Ungar-Sargon.
Saying no to the selling out of the future of their children. And it is so dispiriting to see this coming from the so-called right. And I think you nailed it, Rachel. These people do not believe in national borders. They don't know what a nation is. They don't know what it means to feel a sense of obligation, not just to our fellow Americans because they are our fellow Americans, but to people who have less than you. What happened to noblesse oblige? Elon Musk, you are the richest man in the world. You can't have a little bit of respect for the country and the people in it and the working class of the nation that gave you that privilege. You have no respect for the God who gave you that privilege. It is so utterly infuriating. And I'm so grateful to you and to Patriot Steve Bannon, our national hero, for towing the line and holding the line on this and saying, no, we will not sit here and cheer as they take good jobs away from Americans and give them to other people.
And so what is the answer? I mean, I think about this. If we keep importing foreign labor to meet this, demand, if we keep, as you said, driving the wages down, we don't really get to the root of the problem. If Vivek is right that we need more people, which I'm not entirely convinced that is the case. We also could set up programs in inner cities to prepare them to code and do. These are entry level jobs. Let's not pretend like a lot of these are super high tech. Some of them are entry level, and people can be trained into them. But that would require the oligarchs, the titans of the universe, to take less money and invest in this, for our government to invest in those kinds of programs.
You're totally right. And think of the irony here, Rachel. They shipped all their good manufacturing jobs overseas and said, we'll teach them to code. Now it turns out, no, actually, we're going to import people to do the coding.
Right, exactly. So I want to end on what I think is a positive note, because what I see is left and right coming together in this. Why don't you talk about that a little bit? Because I think it's a really positive thing.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, this moment revealed that the divide in this country is not left versus right, and it's certainly not, God forbid, racial. It is the multiracial, multi-ethnic working class coalition coming together and taking on the oligarchs, both the over-credentialed college elites and the oligarchs of Silicon Valley, and saying we're going to stand together. Black, white, Hispanic, Jewish, Asian, working class Americans are going to stand together for the future of their children.
Yeah, I'm really glad that you came, and I have to tell you, I think this debate that's going on is incredibly important, and I'm glad we're having it, and I'm glad and I'm grateful to Elon Musk that it's happening on Twitter.
Rachel Duffy, one of the smartest folks over at Fox, with our guest, the author of Second Class, and boy, did she nail it. We know the audience loved the book, Second Class, How the Elites Portrayed America's Working Men and Women, Batia Ungar-Sargon. Talk to me for a moment about this left and right coming together, because you're 100% correct. This is about American citizens. In MSNBC last night couldn't get over. They said, well, we do agree with Bannon on this populism, but we know he's a racist, and we know they're all white nationalists. This is a true coming together of the populist movement of both left and right to defend American citizens. Is it not, ma'am?
First of all, thank you so much for having me. It is such an honor to be here with you. They literally put you in prison because you were revealing the truth, which is that the divide in this country is not racial. It's between the elites and the multiracial working class, who all want better jobs for their children, all want a future in this country that reflects them and their values and their hard work. And what the left does, and now the tech bro right as well, is they try to racialize this to hide the fact that this is about citizenship. It is supposed to mean something to be an American citizen. And this is something that working class people of all races intuitively understand. And it is something that the oligarchs on both sides, not only do they not understand it, Mr. Bannon, but they have invested everything in erasing the concept of citizenship, erasing the concept of a nation state and national borders. Why? Because they have gotten very, very, very rich doing that. And that is the whole game here. It was the game when the left was calling working class people of all races racist because they want a future for their children. And it's the whole game when Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy say that they're too lazy and stupid. Yes, they said that to your faces. It's the whole game. And you have been on this from day one, Mr. Bannon. You are a national hero and a patriot who taught me what the real story in this country is.
How can they How can they continue to get away with this? Is what's confusing to me. And you know, Elon retweeted somebody that called American workers retarded. Vivek's just basically, you could see the underpinnings of the hatred of the American people right there. But how can they get away with all night last night on CNN and MSNBC? Highly skilled foreign workers, Americans not qualified to do these jobs, when we know from the evidence and the facts, these are principally entry-level jobs. We've asked everybody, the millions that have come in here on these visas, show us one example where an American tech worker didn't have the qualifications to do that job. We have yet to get an answer on one of the millions that have come here over the 20 or 30 years of this program. But how can they continue to sell the fact that Americans either not qualified, these are highly qualified foreigners that are coming over, or Americans don't want the jobs and the jobs are going open, which both are bald-faced lies, ma'am?
They can continue to sell it because there is an elite in this country that is very, very hungry to buy it, because it puts money in their pockets. So if you have a college degree, you're in that knowledge industry, and you are the consumer of working class or middle class labor, of course you want an open border because it puts money in your pocket. Of course you want to ship manufacturing overseas because then when you buy things, you can buy cheap stuff. And guess what else? When you go to compete in the housing market, suddenly there's a lot less competition because the top 20% is controlling over 50% of the GDP, which means that you're no longer competing with your cleaning lady or your landscaper when it comes to buying a home. Suddenly, it's much easier for you to achieve the American dream.
So prior to the rise of Donald Trump in 2015, I would look at these questions. I was very much for immigration restriction and for absolutely crushing illegal immigration and for restricting legal immigration. But I was just rah on board with free trade and free markets. And it was Donald Trump who woke me up to let's arrange our economy and let's arrange our trade policy in the interests of American workers. So Donald Trump sent me on a journey, and Batya Ungar-Sargon, she comes from the left, right? She often has a Marxist perspective on things, but I came from right-wing Republican free market talking points, and Batya Ungar-Sargon did a PhD at UC Berkeley in literary analysis, and she had a long background in a left-wing perspective on life. But we both kind of ended up here and got united by Donald Trump's America First policies.
While you are consuming the labor of an American who can no longer afford that American dream. We used to believe that this was our God-given right. Our rights in this country are guaranteed by God. And that is something that means something that binds us together as citizens of this great nation, culturally and economically and socially. And of course, this is not about race. This is something that binds Americans of all races together. But the oligarchs on the left, the over-credentialed college elites, and now the tech bro rights, these people don't believe in these things, because to destroy the concept of the nation is to put millions and billions of dollars back in their pockets. You know, they're always saying that mass immigration raises the GDP. Of course it raises the GDP. It makes oligarchs unbelievably wealthy to have a limitless...
I'm not nearly as enthusiastic about Steve Bannon as Batya Ungar-Sargon. I'm not a fan of Steve Bannon's War Room. There's just such a torrent of crap on this show. But damn it, if he isn't great on this particular issue of the need to dial way back on H-1B visas and dial back on immigration, right? Not a fan overall of Steve Bannon's War Room. I think the show is generally just poor quality, but damn, does it not rise to the occasion of this particular issue.
Supply of low-wage indentured servitude. The problem is that it makes Americans much poorer. And what you have done, Mr. Bannon, is given voice to the masses who did not have a voice to object when there was a handshake agreement pre-Trump between both parties to further destroy the border, ship jobs overseas, and import a slave caste who are indentured servants or enslaved to cartels to do low-wage and working-class and middle-class jobs here. It's the whole game. They are getting rich off of the working class. It is class warfare from the top, from the elites on both sides against the multiracial working class coalition.
Did you find this out? Give me a minute before we go to break on Second Class, because your book, when we had you on here, the audience loved it, but you've been working on this for years. How did you get the idea? Just tell me the idea first. What was Second Class? How?
Okay, this is Steve Bannon, immigration
moratorium. Is the one that folks like Stephen Miller and Stephen Bannon have been pushing for years, that we should restrict, limit, perhaps end all immigration in the U.S., legal and illegal, right? Stuff.
I am on board with a complete cessation to immigration, but I am willing to compromise where we have 1% as many immigrants as we do right now, but they are of much higher quality. That's my compromise.
The border around asylum, but also H-1B visas. I mean, just listen to the two of them on Bannon's old radio show back in March of 2016. This is before Trump was even the Republican nominee. Take a listen.
And they see these oligarchs down there with 54 private jets, and they're not down there for their health. They're called together by Karl Rove, and it's a Stop Trump movement. And it's a Stop Trump movement because they want unlimited HB1 visas. Isn't the beating heart of this problem right now, the real beating heart of it, of what we got to get sorted here is not illegal immigration, as horrific as that is, and it's horrific. Don't we have a problem? We've looked the other way on this legal immigration that's kind of overwhelmed the country.
The history of America is that an immigration on period is followed by an immigration off period.
So be very clear there, right? H-1B visas, legal immigration, and immigration off period. Like, they have a pretty clear vision. Miller's going to be the one writing that border bill.
We have a very clear vision. For folks who have just come to this show over the last year or a couple of years, this has been a, 10, 12-year project. The years of 15 and 16 were trench warfare. And 14, with Dave Brad coming on scene, the huge victory we had taking down Cantor, we could walk you through, and Stephen Miller, who had been on Michelle Bachmann's staff and then went to Jeff Sessions, and Jeff Sessions kind of held the line in the Senate. But so when people like David Sachs and Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy show up, dude, I've taken down bigger guys than that a decade ago, okay? You think the odds are long against these guys, or the odds are long against Biden? You should have seen the odds against Trump at the beginning. That was an event. I was doing Breitbart News Radio, many of the audience. That was really a call-in show. I mainly took calls. I would have guests like Stephen Miller. Something big came up, but principally we would have it would be call-in over a Sirius XM, and it's a morning show, 6 to 9. That was a group of Karl Rove, and I use the term oligarchs, and people go, "What are you talking about?" They all, I think it was 54 of them, got together in an island. I think it was an island off of South Carolina, to have an emergency meeting in March of how do they stop Trump. Trump was running the tables, and I think he had just won Super Tuesday. How to stop Trump with these primaries that were left. How to stop Trump and how to put as much money as possible. And the issue, one of the big issues, was H-1B visas. Because I said, look, it's immigration overall. What Biden did is so radical, was to try to defeat inflation, to crush the relatively low-skilled or unskilled workers, African-American and principally Hispanic, by allowing, 8, 10, 12, 14, 15, you pick the number, millions and millions and millions of people. And now they argue, as Bocci just told you, well, it added 1% to the GDP because they're taking all their money and buying Doritos. They'll always come up with another lie.
And GDP is a terrible measure of economic well-being. You could break a bunch of windows and increase the GDP. And even if there was a great measure of economic well-being is not co-equal with quality of life, right? We need an America with higher cohesion, higher social trust, and higher quality of life, and even if that calls for some sacrifice of economic growth.
But back then it was the same issue. H-1B visas. And remember, we do have a clear vision. It's total immigration. Right now, I say we must demand a moratorium on all immigration, all the students, everything. A moratorium. We just got to settle down and figure this thing out. Because the system's been gamed for decades and decades and decades. And who pays the price? Who pays the price? The American citizen. Do you not have enough on your shoulders? Is the anxiety not enough? Announced yesterday, what have I been saying on here? Credit cards at $1.2 trillion face amount. The credit card companies just wrote off last quarter, I think $78 billion, if my number's correct. Up 14% on write-offs of credit card non-performing, the highest since, I'm going to throw out a random date, the highest since, wait for a random date, you're waiting for it, you're ready for it, 2008. Does that date ring a bell? Because that's the beginning of the collapse of the elites in this country, the financial collapse that they manufactured and they made a fortune off of. And then because the most progressive, and hey, Bush got us into this. He's the worst president this country's had since Buchanan. Jimmy Carter, God rest his soul, and he'll have his state funeral next week. Jimmy Carter's in the top 5, but you got to throw Biden and you got to put Bush right there and back up Buchanan, okay? 2008 crash, but Obama, the most progressive president in history, did the most neoliberal bailout the elites. The greatest concentration of wealth happened on that watch. How they bailed it out. And
Okay, Sean Spicer
Elon
was
Musk
on
and
Bannon.
Vivek Ramaswamy, the tech overlords who appear to be running Trump's second-term agenda, rely on highly skilled immigrants to power their enterprises. Those immigrants come to this country to work with an H-1B visa, which provides terms that are extremely favorable to their employers and also an amazing opportunity for the folks coming to work here. Folks basically have to stay at their job in order to stay in the country. If they leave their position, they have 2 months to find a new job or risk getting deported. So you can see why someone like Elon Musk likes them so much. For example, this is not abstract. When Musk bought Twitter and a huge percentage of the staff headed for the exits, Vice News reported on how Twitter employees on visas can't just quit. The other side of the debate over the H-1B visa is the one that folks like Stephen Miller and Stephen Bannon have been pushing for years, that we should restrict, limit, perhaps end all immigration in the U.S., legal and illegal, right? Stuff at the border around asylum, but also H-1B visas. I mean, just listen to the two of them on Bannon's old radio show back in March of 2016. This is before Trump was even the Republican nominee. Take a listen.
And they see these oligarchs down there with 50
each other's throats about what to do with their newfound power. Should they use the legal immigration system to continue supplying Silicon Valley and other industries with highly skilled workers? Or should they apply some new racist immigrant exclusion act, like the Chinese Exclusion Act, to deport all those workers and let Americans take their jobs? Defense of the former argument, that is continuing.
So is it possible to do anything in favor of your people without being called a racist?
H-1B visas. Elon Musk spent his Christmas week absolutely melting down the social media platform he owns. He has since deleted many of those posts, including one that replied approvingly to a post calling American-born workers in general a slur, the R word, for being too stupid to be able to do the jobs that workers on H-1B visas were doing. One emblematic post is still up where Musk tells opponents of H-1B visas to F themselves before pledging to go to war on this issue, the likes of which you cannot possibly comprehend. Although he seems to have underestimated how much the MAGA diehards hate immigration, his online base of right-wing Twitter trolls quickly turned on him, spurned on by the likes of Bannon, as well as Laura Loomer, the fringe far-right activist, who spent much of the fall cozying up to Trump before his campaign stepped in and pushed her aside.
It's not a civil war because they're not tough enough. They're just not.
I don't think that it's acceptable for George Soros, Elon Musk, or Peter Thiel. It doesn't matter what side of the political aisle a billionaire is on. I don't think that it's acceptable for billionaires to have this much power and this much access.
On the policy dispute here, and there is a real one, Trump actually took Musk's side on it, coming out in support of H-1B visas in comments to the New York Post. Quote, I have many H-1B visas on my properties. I've been a believer in H-1B. I've used it many times. It's a great program. Now, I have to say, I think Trump might be confused here. I don't think his properties are hiring a ton of, say, like software engineers off H-1B. As the New York Times reports, Trump has been a frequent and longtime user of the similarly named but starkly different H-2B visa program, which is for unskilled workers like gardeners and housekeepers. Of course, you could drive yourself crazy trying to track Trump's position on anything at any given moment. In 2016, of course, he called for, guess what? The H-1B to be banned.
It's Tuesday, 31 December, in the year of our Lord 2024. That's the last time I guess we'll say that, or this morning show. It's the last show of the year. We've got a lot planned to get through, but we've got to get through this first thing about immigration. I want to bring in Sean Spicer. Sean, you were comms director for the White House and the spokesman for the president, and also on the campaign you came in and bailed us out and helped Jason for the sprint to the end. But I first met you, Sean, when you were comms director with rights over the RNC. In fact, spring of 16, we had a lot of interaction together, Commander. And you remember Breitbart Radio, my morning show, we're talking about the exact same topic. In fact, I think that Karl Rove, I'm not saying you and Reince instigated it, but I think that was somehow an RNC adjacent meeting where they all went down there on that was the last gasp of the Stop Trump movement. But what are we talking about? We're talking about H-1B visas. You remember that day, sir?
Winning is important, and you win by occupying the center. And so you don't want to push people unnecessarily out of your coalition. Instead, I think it's wiser to accept people for what they are and to accept their contributions. So I'm not the most unabashed Sean Spicer fan, Steve Bannon fan, Elon Musk fan, Vivek Ramaswamy fan, but I welcome them to MAGA. I respect their contributions. I'm grateful for their contributions, and I'll speak up when I think they're wrong. So let's be glad that right now the MAGA movement occupies the center of America. We want a big tent.
Dude, I remember very vividly getting a call saying, who is this Steve Bannon guy and how are we going to solve this? And I said, well, let's go meet with him because I don't think it's going away. And you still haven't 10 years later. It's been amazing.
Unbelievable.
And thank you for the kind words. It's been one heck of a ride.
Well, Sean, so you've been there since the beginning, and obviously you had a job with Reince. You guys were kind of the establishment guys, but you saw the issues that were popping up, and I know that you went out of your way behind the scenes of the donors to say, hey, look, you guys got to understand there's something happening in the country. We're here, 8 years later, and we're having a debate about this very topic. Now, you have your own show. You've got your own Twitter feed, which is huge. You've got a big following. You did something the other day. And walk us through what you did. In the heat of this and the nastiest part of it, which is about 48 hours ago, you decided to do something. What was it?
Yeah, first, let me just address what you said. I think the one thing that you and a lot of the folks showed us is that for so long we had heard this is how it works, right? You can't do anything different. This is the system. This is how. And I think what Donald Trump showed us more than anything.
Oh man,
you can
technical
fight back.
quality is too bad here. I'm trying to do a high quality show. I can't have this substandard audio. Let me try another video.
Ben
here.
Bergquam's been on this from day one. Ben, get us up to speed. You've put yourself, Oscar Blue Ramirez, your entire team, I don't know, 4 or 5 years. We met you at the wall years and years ago, back in 2019. We built the wall down there. You were down there with us. Rob Sig was down there with us. Parker was just a young cub. The SIGs did the streaming from there, just magnificent. The wall we built down there, right in, if you ever seen Sicario, right in the heaviest sex and human trafficking and drug trafficking place right up that hill. Bergquam, you've been at this a long time, brother. I just got to ask you, you know this, you know the illegal side. You guys have been in these camps. You've been down. You went through the Darien Gap. You've been all over where reporters wouldn't go, and BBC and these guys came years after you guys were down there. What's your assessment of this debate we're having over the last couple of days, sir?
Yeah, I totally agree that we should have a moratorium on immigration in total until we stop the bleeding. Our country is bleeding out. It's like our leg, we chopped our leg off, and we're talking about fixing the scab we have on our arm. We've got to stop the bleeding, and it's all tied together. You mentioned these all of these different visas. Now, some of them may have been, idealistic in their intent, but what they've become is a gaming of the system. It's a way to bastardize immigration into America. And all of these NGOs, they all know the games, every single one of them. And when we're talking about whether it's H-1B or any of these things, they're all gamed now. The asylum process. My wife, and I'm a guy who I have 3 children because my wife got to escape communism. Her family got to come here from Laos. But when they came, they had to be sponsored. They had to not be a drain on our society. They had to have families in America who said, we're going to back these people up until they become Americans. And now my wife's family are the most patriotic people I know. My wife, I was there when she got her citizenship. So there's a beauty of coming to America, but it has been so bastardized intentionally by the left that it's unworkable at this point. And so whether you're talking about the Darien Gap, we've gone through it 4 times. The intent, you've got Catholic Charities. I'm here in San Diego. By the way, real quick, Steve, I just want to say this. So I was just down on the border last night. I got illegal aliens coming across, big groups of Chinese and Middle Easterners all day long. We were out there at 9 o'clock last night, groups coming across. We got CBP-1 still coming across. And I just want to show you this. Behind me, and it's hard to see, this is one of the largest bum camps in America. This place is massive. They set this up. San Diego set this up. The same San Diego that is now a super sanctuary city. All of that you see there is a homeless encampment that is right below the salt in the wound, pissing on our veterans. It's right below the Veterans Hospital. So we're taking billions of dollars of our tax dollars and keeping people homeless. Every single street here, San Diego used to be a beautiful city, is just full of homelessness, full of drug addicts. They're not doing anything to fix that. Gavin Newsom and the Democrats have wasted all that money. And while they're doing that, they're inviting in the largest invasion in the history of our country. And the last thing I want to hear from Republicans, it's the same thing we've heard from the rhinos for 20 years. Oh, well, we need to do the DACA. We need to do the H-1B. We need to do this thing. And then we'll deal with the bleeding out. No, you deal with the bleeding out. We are bleeding out as a nation. Stop it all. Prosecute, investigate, and prosecute the people that have been behind this invasion. Defund all of these NGOs, defund the United Nations, defund OIM, defund the UNHCR, any single person that has been involved with this, and investigate every politician in America that has supported this invasion and prosecute the ones that have been co-opted by the cartels. That should be our focus. Stop it all, investigate, prosecute, stop the bleeding, and save America.
I love it. That sounds good to me. All right. Set up, punch. Set up, punch. Here we go, guys. Set up, punch. Set up, punch. Come on, come on, come on, come on, come on.
Thank you. Before we start, I should ask, who are you guys supporting, Israel or Palestine? You specifically, who are we going with? Also, if you could rank races from your favorite to least favorite. Get some opinions on the books here. What age should kids transition at? That is information I need. There's a lot of weird combos because of all this stuff. Recently, I saw two super gay dudes holding hands with Trump hats on. That's a fun combo, right? Ideal situations, build the border wall, then put a glory hole in it. You're not getting in, but a little something for the road. No, I don't think being gay is a choice. Being really gay, probably a bit of a choice, but I hope that's your choice. To wear the shirt that says, I'm a cum slave. You're not waking up every morning, why do I have to do this? You guys are protesting Bud Light crowd or protesting Chick-fil-A the first time? There's a lot of protests right now because brands too gay or not gay enough. That's why nobody protests wrestling, because it's the perfect amount of gay. A little something for everybody. Fuck yeah, white trash, America for the Republicans. Two naked dudes rolling around for the Democrats. A little something for everybody. That's why God approves. Because there's kids starving in Africa. Do you remember parents used to say that? There's kids starving in Africa, you gotta eat your food. African kids love it when you finish your food. It's like their favorite thing, right? They get stoked. They're like, yes, I knew we could do it. And they get pissed when you don't finish. They're like, what the hell? What happens? These algorithms. So I was moving recently, and we were looking up moving companies, but because of the algorithm, they kept showing us this one company that was like an all-girl moving company, like a shitty moving company, right? And honestly, I'm not even saying that to be controversial, but like, has any dude here ever been moving with his chick and halfway through is like, babe, you gotta start a company. You are crushing it.
Okay, female
have like
perspective.
a romantic life because I have an ethnic mom. She's from Turkey, and yeah, she's from a generation where she doesn't say she had boyfriends before she met my dad. She said she had suitors, which I don't know if you guys know what suitors are. It's the same thing as a boyfriend. It's just to protect your honor a little bit, you know? Like, oh, I have a roster of suitors that I keep in the stable on rotation, or I let one of my suitors do butt stuff with me last Thursday, right? Like, it's for your reputation. So she's always comparing her young lifestyle to mine. Like the other day, she's like, Denise, why aren't you having fun out there? When I was your age, one suitor wrote a song for me. Another one crashed his car while he was checking me out, you know? And I used to be like, oh my God, like my mom must have been such a baddie, right? Until the other day, she shows me some old photos of these suitors. Guys, you would not soft launch these people on close friends, okay? Like, it is crazy what old people get away with just because they didn't have Instagram to prove reality, you know? My mom is confidently showing me mouth breather after mouth breather, acting like this is even a story worth mentioning, you know? I'm like, dude, I would not even count these guys, you know? But that's what I realized, that's what old people do to make their lives sound cool. They just sugarcoat it. They just lie. I didn't know you could do that, you know? But now not everything in this life has to be shared, right? Because one of my most communist friends the other day asked if I wanted to join in on a threesome with him and his girlfriend. And I said no right away. Not because I'm anti-threesome, but I think I don't want to be in like a communist threesome, you know? Like, I feel like a communist threesome, that's like, in theory, it works great.
That's okay. That's a good line. I gotta give it to her. That's a good one. Okay, what the hell is
find
going
out
on
in
with
due
Taylor Lorenz?
course, but are you familiar with the journalist Taylor Lorenz?
Not really. When you mentioned that name to me before, I thought you were talking about
You thought I was talking about Taylor
Swift.
yeah. So Taylor Lorenz is a journalist that has covered extremism, online radicalization, a variety of topics. But like she did an interview with the Libs of TikTok woman, and she's somebody that's beat the drum for concerns about stochastic terrorism, for example, which would be Alex Jones talking to his audience about all these Klaus Schwab figures, that it would be better if the world was without them. But he's not directly saying that people need to do something, right? Or actually, he is saying they're doing something, but he's not directly saying go and kill this person, right? And concerns about stochastic terrorism are that people can kind of gin up, like paint targets on people that are then going to encourage people to actually engage in violence or activities. For example, Yoel Roth, the former head of trust and safety at Twitter, whenever Elon Musk targeted him and made implications that he was a supporter of pedophiles because of misrepresenting his dissertation, he had to move out of his apartment and stuff and was in danger, right? So I think Taylor Lorenz is correct when she highlights that we should be concerned about the possibility of encouraging stochastic terrorism, and this being a concern on the right.
Sure. Yep.
Yes. Now, so given that, what's been quite notable is how she and a number of other people, mainly on the leftist side, have kind of glorified the guy Luigi Mangione that shot the CEO, that executed the CEO of the health insurance company in America recently. So he's become a bit of a celebrity figure in a way. And there was a palpable disappointment when it emerged that people found his Twitter account, and it turned out he might be a Huberman, Joe Rogan, slightly libertarian type, right? That was not what people were hoping for. But the thing that has struck me is like Taylor Lorenz, who previously presented this as a huge issue, right? You shouldn't be glorifying violence because it can lead to genuine.
Right, stochastic terrorism, quite the mouthful, and it means that terrorism that is triggered unpredictably. So there's no explicit call for terrorism, but the ground is set and some mentally unbalanced person goes off.
And outcomes in the real world. Now, absolutely no concern with that. So after this news came out, you know, she was posting on Blue Sky a bunch of stuff implying that this was, you know, actually a celebratory event, and also posting up the CEOs of other health insurance companies, almost like she's putting out a freaking hit list. And just today, 4 hours ago at the time of recording, there's a picture of Luigi going to, I think it's trial or something like this, and he's in the orange jumpsuit being escorted by police and, you know, FBI agents or whatever, and he's walking towards it, and she has posted that picture and said, they can't stop making him look cool as hell, right? And she's kind of reveled in this position of, yeah, she's not advocating that people do this, but it's just that like it's completely reasonable and understandable that they would. And like he is very cool and beast and this kind of thing. I don't like him. And I have a clip to play that illustrates then to get your thoughts.
Okay, stochastic terrorism has received a lot of news media attention just over the past year. I didn't hear about it until the past year. So according to Wikipedia, stochastic terrorism, that is political violence instigated by a hostile public rhetoric directed at a group or an individual. So unlike incitement to terrorism, stochastic terrorism is accomplished with indirect, vague, or coded language, which then grants the instigator plausible deniability for any associated violence.
So this is a person we've never played before because it involves Piers Morgan, right? Someone I viscerally dislike on a genetic level. I feel Piers Morgan, but in this clip, I think he is playing the role of a reasonable critic of Taylor Lorenz position. So listen to this short exchange.
Why would you be in such a celebratory mood about the execution of another human being? Aren't you supposed to be on the caring, sharing left where, you know, you believe in the sanctity of life?
I do believe in the sanctity of life. And I think that's why I felt, along with so many other Americans, joy, unfortunately, you know, because it feels like...
Serious?
I mean...
Joy at a man's execution?
Maybe not joy, but certainly not empathy. Because again,
we're watching the footage. How can this make you joyful? This guy's a husband, he's a father, and he's being gunned down in the middle of Manhattan. Why does that make you joyful?
Of Americans that be murdered. So are the tens of thousands of Americans, innocent Americans, who died because greedy health insurance executives like this one push policies of denying care to the most vulnerable people. And the many millions of Americans that have watched people that I care about suffer and in some cases die because of lack of health care.
So should they all be killed then? Should they all be killed, these healthcare executives? Would that make you even more joyful?
No, that would not.
Well, why not?
And,
why are you laughing?
I think because it wouldn't fix the
You seem to find the whole thing hilarious.
I find your question funny.
A bloke's been murdered in the street. I don't find it funny at all.
You've got Piers' moral outrage.
Piers, he's doing his thing. Yeah, so I mean, this is, you know, for people that are not on social media, you might not know, but you know, it's a pretty commonly expressed sentiment amongst the, I don't know, activist left, I suppose you'd call it, that you know, people might not outright endorse it as a positive policy going forward, but at the very least are kind of okay with the executing healthcare CEOs because of their crimes, essentially. So there has been a lot of hero worship. Definitely helps that the guy's good looking.
I saw someone say this is like finding out about Robin Hood in the 1300s. Like every new update that comes from this guy, I'm like, that's so sick.
So yeah, that's the thing that's been going on. Yeah.
In that clip as well, Matt, you hear that thing where it reminds me of a lot of the people that we've covered where they want to like say something edgy. Like, they'll say, you know, what was your reaction to that event? Well, it was actually joyful. And then when they're pushed on it, they'll immediately say, well,
like, I don't endorse it.
Yeah, I'm not. No, I'm not saying it's good, right? Like, I'm not saying that we should call for it. And I feel like if this were a different target, if it was somebody that was vilified by the left and somebody was being interviewed and said like the murder made them feel joyful, and then they said, well, you know, not joyful, you know, I'm not advocating for it. And like, I just think you cannot do the hand wringing about stochastic terrorism and then promote, oh, look how cool this person is. And there's plenty of legitimate reasons that people would, you know, feel that it's okay to kill healthcare CEO. And that doesn't matter in terms of your opinion about the American healthcare situation. Whether you think it's great, which very few people I think do, or whether you think it's terrible and exploitative. The issue is executing people responsible for those. So like, if this principle is okay, there is a lot of exploitative industries out there with a lot of capitalist figures, right? A lot of CEOs around that it would be, maybe it's not okay, but you know, like the moral calculus for murdering them is certainly something that we have to debate. And like, if you want to take that stance and take the stance that it's extremely bad when people imply that others could be morally correct to act in targeting people that they see as doing severe harm, like there's an obvious contradiction there.
Okay, poor Elliot Blood. He's down to 4% power on his phone. He estimates he's got about 10 minutes left. He wants to make sure I make them count. Now, I was tempted to end this show because we've got college football playoffs on, Penn State versus Boise State. But on the other hand, Penn State's about an 11-point favorite. They're highly likely to just blow out Boise State. And I'm just looking here, and Penn State just scored a touchdown at 7-0. Okay, I'll give prayers that Boise State at least makes this a game. Get some analysis from the 29th of December, 2022. Elon Musk, the techno shaman, decoding the gurus, decoding Elon Musk.
Electronic car production and social media, like marketing and brain computer interfaces. That is a lot of hats for an engineer to wear.
So if you compare that scenario, as if that were true, to another scenario where there's just so many cases on record of him making claims that can be shown to be demonstrably untrue, can be shown to be absurdly optimistic. And
yeah, Elon Musk, like Donald Trump, lies a lot. That's not all he is. He's not just a liar and a con man. He's also a man of substantial achievement.
Are essentially lies. Then it seems that version of where he's pretending is a far more realistic one. We don't want to go through all of the businesses, but I'll just spend a moment to talk about Neuralink, I think. And that's because I did my PhD on psychophysiology. I was collecting EEG signals from around the motor cortex of the brain, doing signal processing stuff with that. And in the course of that work during my PhD, I had to become familiar with the brain-computer interface literature, the BCI literature. And it's been an ongoing thing for many years. I can't comment on the likelihood of setting up a Mars base in the next 5 or 10 years, but I can comment on whether or not this Neuralink brain interface is plausible or whether it's science fiction. And let me tell you, it is science fiction. The way it's been described as doing amazing things that could soon cure paralysis or all kinds of disabilities. The way he talks about it is as if like it's something from the Matrix, where you've got like a shunt in your head and your
Matrix. The Matrix. The Matrix is a very different universe, but carry on.
I don't want to get into it, but people can probably understand that there are significant practical problems with literally drilling a hole in the top of your head, sticking a wireless electronic device in there, which has got batteries in it, and then plugging it up again, and then recharging yourself with a wireless magnetic recharger, which, by the way, gives off heat, which is generally a bad thing to be happening in the middle of your brain. And on top of that, the way the brain works, like there is no sort of magic shunt, right, for any electronic device to just communicate with your brain. At the very most, what you can get is after a whole bunch of training that there is some kind of adaptation, and you can somehow learn that if you think certain things, then maybe you can get the cursor to go this way. And if you think other things, the cursor can go that way. That kind of research has been demonstrated before with recordings and interfaces that were not invasive. So the Neuralink company that he bought was a real company run by real researchers, had a strong background, a publication background from Stanford. They were pushing this technology forward, but it seems what happened is Musk then bought this company, and then suddenly the claims and the discourse around it became like 1,000 times more ambitious, yet nothing or very little seems to be happening under the surface. So
except for monkeys are being like
monkeys are dying in large numbers.
But that is something that happens when technologies are getting developed anyway. I have my issues with some of the primate testing that goes on, but like in these cases in particular, it's stuff like you have to make the limbs inoperable and then do brain surgery on them so that they are only able to operate via computers. And there's something dystopian about that, like distasteful to me. But it is also a way that we may end up with implants and robotic artificial limbs that work better. So there's cost to that. But I think one issue though, Matt, is I think the amount of fans of Musk has been decreasing as he's rampaged on Twitter. But it is true that, for example, bone conduction for hearing aids, right, works by implanting something in the skull, right?
The Australian company Cochlear actually is, I think, the world leader in that. But that's a very different kind of thing.
I only use it to mention that there are technologies that are developing, and that it is likely, that at some point in the future that there will be brain computer interfaces that work very well. So it's not to say that anybody that tries to push that or that has that as a goal is in cloud cuckoo land. It's just that the engineering and technological goals are not minor in this. They're huge, and they may well be overcome with this new innovative technology, but the way that Musk talks about it bears a much more resemblance to Elizabeth Holmes presenting about Theranos than it does some scientist in the Manhattan Project.
Yeah, exactly. That's the distinction I want to make. And before I said these are legitimate businesses or legitimate lines of research inquiry. And it could be that at some point in the future there is breakthroughs, even surprising breakthroughs like we've seen with, say, artificial intelligence and these GPT-3 systems.
I didn't talk about cricket, so there's a terrific new doco on YouTube called Death of a Gentleman, what cricket is really about.
You can't talk about cricket without thinking about the values that were behind it. The whole idea of fair play, you walked, if you nicked it to the wicketkeeper, you didn't claim a catch that was on the half volley. All these things were part of what we were trying to say to the world about the way we should treat one another.
That was a priest commenting on cricket.
The spirit of cricket, I mean, it's integrity, I think it's honesty. It is its own code, its own moral code, and it's served the game pretty well for 130, 140 years.
I remember Kofi Annan at the United Nations in New York once making the comment about something that had taken place in the world and said, that's not cricket. Kofi Annan has never played a game of cricket in his life, but he knows what cricket stands for. And if someone at the United Nations, the head of the United Nations, could use that term, it means that cricket stands for something, and the game should never be allowed to die.
How could cricket ever die?
Okay, Death of a Gentleman, what cricket is really all about. All right, let's just get a little burst here. Decoding Elon Musk.
You have to acknowledge that there is a legitimate team of engineers who may well have been working on the project long before Musk came along. So there's the reality, which is that it's...
Okay, let's bring big cricket fan Elliot Blatt onto the show. Elliot, what's going on, man? Elliot Blatt, speak to us, bro. Tell us about riding the bang bus. Paint the full picture of your humiliation on the bus, Elliot. What those bros did to you, it was wrong, Elliot. Why can't I hear you, Elliot? Speak up, Elliot. I want the full story. Elliot Blatt, speak to me, bro. Come on, Elliot.
The super hard, super long-term research and development program. And then you have Musk's claims. The other people have described it as science fiction theater. Technology is real, science is real, progress in science and technology is real. We have hopes and aspirations, I think, which sit on top of that. And it seems like Musk is quite good at speaking to those.
I do have a question about that, because one aspect is that Steve Jobs' infamous reality distortion field, right, where he, in a similar way, overhyped and overclaimed, but in the end, Apple's hugely profitable company is one of the main drivers in the tech space and made all these innovations. And sometimes people look at Tesla or SpaceX and they're very much saying, okay, maybe he oversells things, but Tesla is putting reusable rockets around, and or not Tesla, sorry, SpaceX is, and Tesla is opening up more factories and increasing its production process and that kind of thing. So you can see why people could become enamored and regard naysayers as just the kind of people that would have said, we'll never fly in a plane or that kind of thing. You can see how that would take hold. But I think a point to note is that slightly different than Steve Jobs and many of the other gurus that we cover, Elon Musk, as you'll hear in these clips, he's not a very good public speaker. He's got more verbal tics than me and Matt do, which is saying something, and saying something for someone who is infamous for giving these kind of bombastic presentations. He's confident, but it is not the linguistic proficiency that we see with the usual guru type. And it might be precisely because he is a billionaire, one of the richest people on the planet, and he has these companies and stuff that he can point to that are actually real. He doesn't need to do the same level of pageantry. In some ways, it's more impressive that he's so unassuming. But I just want to make that point about, like, listen to his delivery and note the difference from the usual gurus that we cover.
Yeah. So let's hear some more of his delivery.
Yes. So I'll stick with this factory bit because there's a bit more about this. And part of this is talking about the myth making around what kind of CEO he is.
So is this you, or is this? So you do all these different things here.
No, that's literally me.
So do you?
This is not someone else who did this. I was living in the factory in Fremont, and the one in Nevada for 3 years straight. That was my primary residence. I'm not kidding, literally.
Did you keep the couch?
I actually slept in a couch at one point in a tent on the roof. And then, but for a while there, I was just sleeping under my desk, which is out in the open in the factory, and for an important reason. And it was damn uncomfortable sleeping on that floor. And always, when I woke up, I'd smell like metal dust.
We went to visit, and they bought him a new couch.
Yeah, as you were saying, Chris, it's not bombastic. It's kind of self-effacing. There's like funny little anecdotes. I think if I didn't know so much about him and the many, many times that he's had interviews like this, where he has sort of humble bragged, I suppose, himself into a position of explaining how instrumental he is to so many things and how he's going to change the world, take humanity to a higher place. If I didn't know all that context, I would find the single paragraphs and sentences that he says, perfectly normal and kind of, well, not charming, but
admirable in a sense, right? Like he just sounds like a very devoted CEO figure who wants to rally the troops, right? Yeah. And just to let that play out a little bit more, here's him elaborating on that.
I stopped using the couch. I just slept on the floor under my desk so during shift change, the entire team could see me. And that's important because, like, the team, if they think the sort of their leader is off somewhere having a good time, drinking Mai Tais on a tropical island, which I could definitely have been doing and would much have preferred to do. I'm not actually a masochist, I think. But the thing is that since the team could see me sleeping on the floor during shift change, with nothing, they knew I was there, and that made a huge difference. And then they gave it their all.
So the focus is on always lowering cost and providing leadership.
So you get all the things that you said there about, he sounds very sincere, and he's kind of laughing at himself like it's, I'm not like I want to do this, but this is how you get people to succeed. And you got to show people that you're part of the team, and you hear the audience react, right, as well, through his like just kind of expression of sincerity. But fundamentally, what he is saying is like all the engineers regard him as one of the team, and he is working harder than anybody in the company really to make it a success. And when you pair that with the way he described it, which was him kind of running around the production line, sorting it out. And Ron Barron asked him, is it you though that's doing all of this? Like, you're finding all the things? And he was like, yep, it's me. So he's the CEO, He's the troubleshooter. He's the guy liaising across departments, and he's doing that for 4 or 5 different companies simultaneously. Quite the feat.
Yeah. At the risk of seeming cynical, there could be a very good reason for portraying yourself as being fundamentally different from other business owners, not just a bean counter, but some kind of wunderkind, someone that is absolutely obsessed, absolutely dedicated, has this polymathic engineering ability and organizational ability. And the reason is the share price and attracting investors. A huge amount of his net worth, and he was for a short while, I think, the richest person on earth, and is still extremely rich. Companies like Tesla are valued at amazing multiples, like even considering a very optimistic future in terms of them gaining a significant portion of the electric car market. Most level-headed analyses say that it's completely overvalued. And this is an era, Chris, of where we've had NFTs, we've had Bitcoin, we've had a massive amount of money injected into the economy to shore things up during COVID and other crises. And it's an era where there is a lot of money following speculative business opportunities. So there is a very functional role in building a myth around yourself to make those great claims. And if people believe in you, believe in your mission and your specialness, then that could serve as an extremely good justification why you should invest in those companies regardless of how much you're paying.
So Elon Musk, Donald Trump, Vivek Ramaswamy, right? Everybody in public life deserves some scrutiny and accurate criticism. We're all better off when we're able to put people in an appropriate context. I am improved when I receive accurate criticism. So he has a substantial body of achievement. He's probably the world's richest man. He made valuable contributions to Donald Trump's campaign. And yet, like with Donald Trump or anyone else, don't take everything that he says at face value. Recognize that he has his strengths and weaknesses, that he has something of the charlatan and the con man and the self-effacing, humble, bragging quality, in addition to sharing some powerful insights and powerful truths and accomplishing things that nobody else can accomplish. So I am definitely not on the Elon Musk is a con man bandwagon. I simply recognize that, like many other business leaders, there is an element of the con man to him, but he's much more complicated than that. So I certainly would not dismiss or minimize or reduce Elon Musk's substantial achievements. And yet, right, there are valuable, accurate criticisms to be made of Elon Musk and everybody else in public life. So he is a living legend, as the chat says. He has changed the world. He is changing the world. Perhaps nobody else could have accomplished the things that he